Okay. Far away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for your attendance. I really do appreciate it. Today, we are going to be going over the last 3 weeks. I know this isn't very much time compared to our last meeting, but we're going to go over look at what we've done in the last month, our successes, our challenges, some things we've got to look at a little bit further. We'll have time for questions at the end. So if you'd like to put questions in the chat, I'll try and address them at the end, or wait until the end and we'll do some questions and answers. Okay, so in November, we have completed our legal research. We are going for a Marshall Islands incorporation. Our treasury has launched on multiple chains. Our user journeys are complete. We know how DAO members will interact with our protocol. We have a feature list which is complete, so we know what features we will aim to offer and why. We have sourced a Web3 developer, and we've got a couple more as a backup. And we now know how to publish journals, and we've pretty much fully researched that now. So tasks we're going to continue and are in progress. We are looking at Treasury features, so that will be what the Treasury will actually be able to do. We are talking to future partners to help with our needs in certain areas and potentially establish synergies. Our white paper is in its third revision and is looking pretty epic. That will be ready for our community call on the 7th of January 2025, which will be our next call. Our constitution is also in its third draft, so that should be ready for our next community call, be ready before then. And the legal incorporation process has begun, but a little stumbling block is we need our white paper and constitution formulated before that. So that's my primary focus over the next week is completing that. And we've begun bug hunting in various aspects of the Charmverse instance that we're using. So new tasks that will be tackled in December are we are going to design our own soulbound token, use art from the MFMP, and that will be utilized in our credential system. We are going to look at a way of doing real world printing, like journal printing, directly from the Treasury. So that'll take a little bit of magic and maybe some development work, but it looks a bit of looks interesting. There's another protocol interested in helping us do that. We'll be looking at virtual site offices to assist with our access to Treasury features. I'll go into this more a little bit later. We will be designing a website with some 3D visuals and modern yet functional layout with the aim of providing smooth user interface and a smooth user experience for all age groups. And we will begin to look at incentivization and we'll see how that's going to pan out. So again, showing you the same slide as last time, this will be the way we will be structured. We'll be registering a non-profit LLC in the Marshall Islands. And again, this is once we've done our constitution and our white paper. To go on Dr. Holmes's point from last time, we will be able to set up a legal wrapper which will enable us to spin up an offshore company in 10 different jurisdictions should we need a redundancy option. And that can happen ridiculously quickly. I can push a button on it and it can happen overnight that process can start.
Here, here. Excellent.
Fantastic. Thank you, gentlemen. We may need to incorporate a subsidiary in the EU to gain access to EU banking services, and whether we actually need that is something that I'll investigate over the next 30 days, 60 days. So our Treasury, as mentioned, has launched. That is the Treasury address. If you'd like to look at our Treasury, you can go to Etherscan, so ETHERSCAN, Etherscan, and type in EVO Labs DAO.eth into the search bar, and that will show you our Ethereum chain address. We've launched on Ethereum, Optimism, Gnosis, Polygon, zero knowledge Ethereum virtual machine, which is a zero knowledge chain, which might come in handy for some future stuff. Base, Arbitrum, Celo, and Avalanche chains. We will accept donations on any of these chains in any currency. We have, ignore that, we've actually got $1,847 in our on our Treasury as of time of writing, and I'll reiterate that donations are open. Current features and things we aim to implement in the future as soon as possible and we're actively pursuing. So the multi-sig signing for all transactions, so that's multiple people have to validate a transaction. We've got 2 laptops and 2 hardware devices in the hands of 2 founders. We have 2 more laptops and 2 more hardware devices going out to 2 other people within the community. And yeah, we will have multi-signature signing for all transactions very, very soon. We have the ability to swap tokens within the Treasury, so any token for any token. And we can come together as a group and decide which tokens we'd like to keep or have a basket we'd like to keep, whatever we'd like to do. We have the ability to loan against any tokens we decide to keep. And if we use an over-collateralization option, the rates are pretty low. We can stake our tokens and receive passive income. We have a bot to manage our positions to ensure they'll never get liquidated, so that's quite handy. We're in the process of setting up a Web3 IBAN and Euro. It's electronic euros, so it's not real euros account. An e-money, basically. This could enable us to connect to the European banking system, but the current challenges are we need a registered address in the EU. So that's why I was talking about looking at subsidiaries and setting something up potentially. But we can, if we subscribe to a different service and get a registered business address anywhere else in the world, which will all come as a part of our incorporation in the Marshall Islands, we can pay any invoices to any fiat bank account. So anybody can receive money directly from the DAO, from the Treasury, directly to their bank account. And we'll also be able to issue invoices in fiat. So we can say, okay, please pay us £500, and that £500 would be converted into dollars or whatever we decided for our treasury. And this would also enable some bookkeeping options. We can also batch transactions so that we can mint multiple NFTs and distribute them really cheaply rather than users paying for gas individually or us forking out on gas for individual transactions. And we've already integrated our on-chain voting mechanics, and we'll be testing this with our proposal workflow over December, once we've launched our soulbound token for the alpha test. We're hiring a smart contract developer next week to assist with that, to help us launch a soulbound token in a really trustworthy way. Further features that we've got access to but haven't fully investigated or integrated, a collaboration portal for interactive documents and things like that. It's pretty much what we've got already, but there may be some slight differences. The ability to offer auctions, automated membership management, allowance management, and token gating. So these are just little things we'll look at. On a further point, and this is only something that we've been looking at pretty heavily in the last week, the Treasury will itself be releasing AI agents for marketing and trading. I know I've mentioned a marketing one, but there's quite a few protocols now offering AI trading. So we'll be looking into that type of thing, and nothing will be launched officially until everybody in the community knows. But we're going to do some testing of some little models in the background and see what we can get working, because there's quite a lot of hype about them at the moment. And if we can generate another revenue stream for the DAO that literally involves a bot doing some trading, that might be beneficial, depending on the trading mechanics, of course. Yeah, and so more info on this in January 2025. So for our features and user journeys, user journeys are actions conducted by DAO members or admins or project members on the EVO Labs protocol. The vast majority of user journeys are covered in Charmverse. So the thing that we're playing with and we will be forking. Well, we have forked, but we even further decentralizing in the future. And we'll aim to flesh out any user journeys that we've missed, but I think there are very few. We'll be looking at how Charmverse is completing their offering, which will happen over the next couple of months, and how we need to add bits to improve the user experience, the user interface. As our DAO is quite unique, we have had applications to join from all around the world and from multiple different age ranges. All age ranges, in fact. So most DeFi protocols or DAOs, they don't actually have to deal with any of these problems. So that's, I believe, reflected in their user experience and user interface. And so while our current iteration, the centralized Charmverse solution that we're using, it can be difficult to use and there are some unintuitive features, our goal will be to release something that will utilize abstracted features. And so what do I mean by this? With blockchain technology maturing, no one should need to know really how to create a wallet or store private keys or any of these exhausting things. You shouldn't really need to know what chain you're on, or what tokens you've got, or where your tokens are on what chain. You shouldn't need to know how to move between chains and that there's only certain ways you can move them. And you shouldn't really need to know about gas and whether you should need gas on certain chains to pay to move things. It's quite a bit goes against the desire to get a billion new users in crypto, and it just really holds everything back. So what we're going to try and do with the EVO Labs protocol is combine account abstraction, chain abstraction, and gas abstraction to create a truly seamless UI and UX, a user experience and user interface, suitable for all ages and all levels of crypto experience. So account abstraction will allow users to create a non-custodial wallet. That means you guys own it, like when you create the wallet, and it will automatically register itself for the notifications, the calls, the streaming features that we'll be offering within the protocol. It will also allow management of cross-chain interactions and balances, which is really handy. So you only just get one wallet readout, and you don't have to know what's on what chain. And yeah, and chain abstraction technology will be incorporated to ensure users don't need to worry about which chains their assets are on. And moving between chains should be, I believe it should be a back-end thing rather than requiring user knowledge and expertise and expert steps and extra clicks to get something done. I think it should just all be done on the back end. So we're using chain abstraction, and gas abstraction will be employed so users don't need to know about gas, how much they need, how busy the chain is, whatever it is that the normal like crypto users have to be aware of nowadays. And so if we can couple all this with our forum, our governance process, and our communications integration, which will allow messaging, live streams, and conference calls, we believe that will enable a simplified user onboarding experience, multi-chain compatibility, and an incredible user interface if we can design one like that. So we're all trying to think of like how users really would like to use this type of technology and interface with it. And yeah, fingers crossed we're making the right decisions here. So the journal wasn't really at the top of my research until last call when everybody started. Well, not everybody. There were quite a few questions about the journal, and I felt as if I hadn't really answered them or researched them properly. So spent a chunk of the last 3 weeks looking at different journals and what can be done and the DeSci space. And so, yeah, I've really tried to focus on this. So the few DeSci journals I've spoken to, they don't really have very much of an offering bar like PDFs. Like no one's doing real world printing. One company like bundles PDFs to be sent to like Nature or whatever. Some of them could be good. Some of them have some synergy with what we're doing, but we really may need to look at our own solution of what we can do. I've spoken to Karen Elkins, the wonderful lady who appeared in one of our community calls, and she's going to be perfect for assisting with setting out the journals, getting them ready for physical editions, getting them ready for PDF editions, and really helping us with that side of the piece. It's really amazing to have her on board. We believe that peer review can be taken care of by the community or any outside members that want to, jump in and tell us how wrong we are. This led me to sending a little bit of a questionnaire to Bob, because I got stumped at editors. Because as soon as you start thinking about editors, you need someone who's knowledgeable, someone who's unbiased, someone who can really stand back and really understands the technology and says, well, yes, it could work, blah, 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 rather than just poo-poos initially straight off the bat. So I put something together for Bob, which has been voted on in the Substack. And what it's, yeah, my challenge was, where do we go for editors? Do we reach out for individuals? Do we look at research institutions, academics? We can offer open bounties. There's the already established Journal of Condensed Matter and Nuclear Sciences. These guys, I'm led to believe, aren't that well funded. So if we provided a bounty or provided some incentive, these guys could potentially be incentivized to come and help us doing what we're doing. But I found within my research last week this wonderful Lena ecosystem, which I stole from Lenaria, and and all credit should go to them for the image. But it does give us a lovely bird's eye view. So after this poll, it seems as if I should be reaching out to JCM&S, which I will do. But should we not find editors from them, this ecosystem may lead us to some editors that may be able to assist us with unbiased yet knowledgeable editorial oversight. Yeah. So that's pretty much the journals. Oh yeah, for physical printing, that's going to be a bit more of a challenge. There isn't really a way for a DAO to interact. There are printer API companies, and these printer API companies, you can interact with their API. So I think one idea is potentially aggregating all these printer APIs and then being able to produce merch or produce journals or yearly books or whatever the heck it is that we need. That is one solution for bridging that gap between Web3 and real world. So yeah, more research to be done on that. So our white paper, currently in its third revision, will be complete and ready for release for the January the 7th community call. It'll be done earlier for the lawyers just to start the incorporation. The Constitution, thank you very much, Dr. Holmes. Amazing work you've been helping. Thank you, sir. That will again be ready for release for the January the 7th community call, but a bit earlier for the lawyers to go through. And this really will set out our ethos. We're going to try and blend a We the People Constitution with like an article of incorporation. So really to lay out for people exactly what we stand for, exactly what we want to incorporate within this DAO and how we would like to operate going forward. So quite visionary. So yeah, we're testing our workflows at the moment because we're finding quite a lot of bugs within Charmverse, and it helps to bug hunt now before we fork it over and start messing around with it. So we're looking at testing our workflow proposals. We'll have our soulbound token next week so that we'll be able to start testing gated voting and things like that. We've decided to only allow users to create proposals based on pre-made templates because we realized that if we allow anybody to create any proposal any which way they wanted, that would just be a minefield. But it does mean that we have to think now about which templates are needed, by whom, whether there should be some time constraints, whether there should be more opportunities to provide feedback, whether we need feedback loops. So yeah, this is all stuff that we'll be testing over the next couple of weeks. We have project application proposals, which will allow projects to apply to the DAO for funding and project management assistance. We'll have procurement request proposals to allow accepted projects to apply for extra funding for unseen costs. So relating to lab equipment, lab space, data processing solutions, need some more GPU space, whatever. Lastly, we have DAO community proposals. Now, these are a little bit more open-ended, but they're still based on templates and will allow the community to vote to change any aspect of the DAO, including the constitution. A full list of proposals, their structure, and overview with a few examples will be available for next call on the January the 7th. So we have some launch projects. These are the ones we've gone over. Some interesting new ones that I'm sure you'll see. There'll be a heck of a lot more information on them soon. The reason I say that is we have our project application form nearly complete, and this has taken quite a long time to actually get to the bottom of what we want out of in terms of information out of prospective projects. So yeah, we'll have definitely some more information. But what we do have, if these videos work, are some video updates from Henk, which I'm sure you'll all love to watch. No, no, can't hear it. No, okay, terribly sorry. I will have to make sure that those videos, they're on the Charmverse. But anyway, Henk is experimenting with a new power supply. He's got three-phase power going in. He's got some unique effects going on within his within the reactor. He's having some great old fun with his new oscilloscope. And he's got some different colored plasma that tends to be hiding, doing all the wonderful plasma stuff. I'm terribly sorry you can't see these videos. We'll try and have them uploaded somewhere like the YouTube channel, or they're definitely on Charmverse. So once you're a DAO member, you can view all these. Okay, and this is his wonderful new oscilloscope, and you'll be able to see on here that there are some lovely spikes on there. So we have to investigate what the spikes are and how much extra energy there appears to be coming out of the system. Appears. Who knows if this is actually the case? Hope it is. Fingers crossed. Okay, some interesting stuff which I will post up in the chat. I think I can do that. There you go. There is a couple of links for you. So the bagel team, in Holland, have been talking to the bagel team in Australia. The bagel team in Australia are pretty cool. Mr. Scott over in Australia has this wonderful idea to build a 1 meter wide bagel and deliver 200 megawatt pulses to it to see what happens. Now, he's aiming to get a 200 cc volume with altered material properties. If you'd like to know more, I've just put a link to the full presentation that I've taken this screenshot from in the chat. So yeah, and his company, exafuse.com.au. If anyone would like to give them a look, they're creating some really interesting technology and will be helping the DAO moving forward. They've also been building a detection device for the bagel. So this bagel will be doing some wondrous work, but he also mentioned that if one was to have a near-infrared camera, you could see EVO flashes. And this might be something that people want to take note of for the future, that if you need to look at EVOs, you might need a near-infrared camera. So for our development, we've taken on one more back-end developer, and we've got a few more to be onboarded over the next few weeks. I think we've had some challenges with Thanksgiving because I think everybody's traveling around the world. We found a number of smart contract developers to assist us, and we'll be moving forward with a couple of those gentlemen. So a bit of a shill here. This is Bob's Kickstarter. Please, if you can, donate to get this wonderful book created. This is like I have 2 copies of the other one, and I'm going to buy 2 copies of this one, just so I've got them in the house. This is a really amazing book, and the visuals will be far superior to the previous copy. If you need anything, and you need a link to this, I have put it in the chat, but it is also this QR code on the screen just here. So if you'd like to donate or try and get a copy of one of these, there's multiple different categories that you'll qualify for depending on how much money that you can contribute to this Kickstarter. Ruby. Okay, so we're going to be taking a break from community calls just for December, as everyone prepares for Christmas or Thanksgiving or Hanukkah or however you like spending your time. We'll be back on, as I've mentioned 4 times, we'll be back on January the 7th at 2200 Central European time for community call number 4, and we are going to have a heck of a lot of information when that one comes out. So yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting with you on all the developments because there's really lots of exciting stuff happening. So yes, if anybody has any questions, I will try and catch up from the YouTube and yeah, fire them away if anyone has anything. So yes, thank you very much for your time.
Charles, I'd just like to make a few comments about publishing.
Mhm.
I don't think it's necessary to print. I don't think you should worry about printing. So
Mhm.
most people now basically do online journals, download a PDF.
Hmm.
You don't need to have a printing service at all. What generally is happening with a lot of starting journals, I tend to do this in the biological science area. I mean, there's for an article, depending on the journal, there's a price range, like in dollars or in pounds, but probably starting at $500 per article up to $5,000 per article.
Mhm.
So people are paying the publisher to have their work done. And the thing is, there's got to be some cash flow in the process because
Mhm.
the actual peer review stuff, the actual copy editing is really tedious, and so someone's got to be paid for that.
Mhm.
You've got to work out how to get money, to the people doing that part of the work. So, what used to happen in the past, you'd get library subscriptions and whatever, and the journal's got another source of cash flow, and so it's a different way, it's a different business model. What's happening now online is that basically authors are paying to get published. There'll still be a filter, there'll still be a peer review filter,
Mhm.
but you know, if you're going to be in that, if you're going to be the peer review filter and just the editing filter, you've got to pay people for that task because it's time consuming.
Yeah, so I've done a bit of research into that. You're quite right. I think the top end for a journal article into like Nature or something like that was about $8,000 to $10,000, depending on the article. So it's absolutely scandalous. So I think what we're going to have to do is put a pot of a few $1,000s in each year just to secure various people to do the copywriting or the editing or editorial oversight or whatever it is, because we really need this, I think, as a wider learner community to have some sort of official outlet really for all these papers and things like that. So yeah, it'd be wonderful if we could do it and everyone could rally around us in the community. So that, yeah, just to get it done. And I mean that by the wider learner community, you know what I mean? So we could be the collection of papers every year. I mean, and I know the Journal for Condensed Matter and Nuclear Physics is amazing. But yeah, maybe we need more.
Okay, if you want to make a comment, if people can hear me, I don't know whether people can hear me. Can they hear me? No. If you want to make a comment, then put your hand up. Otherwise, I'm just going to check on YouTube. Whilst I'm looking at, okay, ask your questions on YouTube. I did suggest to Charles that we should have some people in the community that print out PDFs if that's the only option available to us initially and bury them. There's just someone responsible for burying them.
I completely agree with that. It's a kind of Akashic record of what we're doing, isn't it?
Well, it's more like a Dead Sea Scrolls record.
Yeah. If it could be chipped on stone, it would be better. But
that's my next comment that I made to Charles. I said, but that would be a bit extreme. Yeah.
This is a completely different tech project, but I always thought that those clay tablets in cuneiform, have actually survived thousands of years because it's robust material. So you need that laser printer that prints, into some nice.
I think you've just solved
material.
our problem. I think you've just solved our problem. I mean, if you can get a 3D printer to print, you can get a 3D printer to score or at least make impressions. Yeah. So maybe we should actually write our papers in cuneiform.
Yeah, cool. Do it.
You actually, just have a little triangle in dimple, and you just have a thing that goes around and goes. It's just one little triangle thing.
That's absolutely being done, Bob, at the moment.
Is it?
Yeah, it's easy enough. That isn't really technically hard.
No. I'm saying like cuneiforms is also one little pointy thing, and you just rotate it and impress into the clay. So maybe we have to write in cuneiform.
Like a new character,
very much like a Braille machine.
Push that into the clay.
Or Braille would work. Braille would work actually. Braille might be faster.
Braille is quick and cheap and readily available. So yeah.
Okay, so I noticed on the bagel that XFuse have made that the limits are not in the limit. The windings are not in the limit of the windings, so they won't correctly produce the toroidal moment. That needs to be considered, so I'll let them know. Right, so okay, so they're talking about having a journal distributed by CNC machine. Okay, Aboriginal rock. Okay, guys, thank you for your contributions. Okay, anyone else in the room want to talk whilst I try and collate things?
Laszlo's got a question from the chat. What is the strategy to distribute the Treasury and the functionality between so many chains? Okay, I'll deal with account abstraction and gas abstraction can hide this complexity from the user, but as you said, we still have to manage it on the back end, including bridges and transactions between moving those involved in chains. Yes, please look at Cluster, who have just been bought out. That's Klaster.io. They've just been bought out by Biconomy. We'll be working with Biconomy and Concero. Concero will be offering all the cross-chain stuff. Biconomy will be doing all of the gas abstraction, chain abstraction. I'd really like you to look at what they're doing and who they've integrated with. You probably used their technology before and not even realized it. So the strategy to distribute to the Treasury will be voting mechanics based on governance decisions, and that will be the only way funds can be distributed from the Treasury. And functionality between chains, that's Concero using cross-chain bridging. So that's Chainlink on the back end using functions in a 26 to 27 seconds finality. So rather than Ethereum, 20 minutes. That's what. Okay. I think that's a good answer. Okay.
Someone is suggesting encoding the books into pathogens. Just writing it as a DNA sequence.
Viral content.
Yes. Yeah. Literally a viral communication.
Wow. Please no.
No, there's enough of that going on anyway. Okay, I'm trying to track. Yeah, okay, I get it. It's a joke.
I don't want to dominate, but if you got, I mean,
Go
I've
for
got
it.
a few more comments I can make if you was short of a.
Far away, Rupert.
Okay. One of the things I've been doing is trying to sort of incentivize the financial community. I mean, you understand, I'm in central London, I have connections in the city, and I've drawn people's attention to this huge difference in price to lead, which in the UK is £1 to kg, and gold, which is £67,000 per kg, right? So if you can do any sort of transmutation, it doesn't have to be terribly efficient. It gets very interesting, all right? And that would be a really good way for this organization to, it is dream selling. I know it's old alchemy.
Well, it's
you'll get a lot
actually
of
something that
attention.
has been done. We've had at least one experiment where we've observed gold being synthesized. Now, whilst it might be a minute bit, it was actually in the impact mark of an active structure.
Yeah, I saw actually on some of your mass specs.
Yeah. So it is something, and in fact, there was one group that did it, and they found that the production of gold was higher concentration than the richest gold reserve in the US.
Yeah, it's big. I think I've got Swiss banks interested. Let's see where it goes. But we need more data.
Isn't the Bendel turbine supposed to produce little dots of gold?
No, that's Malcolm's fantasy. When I looked at that, it is, as I told him, it was probably going to be some sulfates.
Oh, what a shame.
Iron pyrite type
gold.
things. Yeah, literally pyrite gold, iron pyrites. So no, it was definitely not gold. And in fact, I should probably publish that live recorded video of the session looking at those particular spots.
Yeah, because that claim is out there, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, that is the thing with the internet. When someone says something, people copy and paste it. So that's why you've got to get it right first time. Hopefully.
Well, Bob, could you send me your email address, because I've got samples, which you got the MS, MS spec.
Yeah. I have access to one periodically when I can get to California, and then I've got one that I'm paying for on Tuesday again.
Right.
Well,
I tried. Sorry, I tried King's College London, and when I started to explain what I wanted it for,
don't explain. Just say, like, how much will you charge me for analyzing this sample? And I've got this sample, and I think it's interesting. You might not find it interesting. But typically they'll be charging £350 plus tax an hour, and for that price I can get a flight to California for a couple of hours, and I can spend a couple of days on Alan's machine, or I can for not so affordable, but without the travel I can do it here. So we can arrange that, Rupert.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, I mean UCL, King's, lots of people, Imperial, have all got these machines, so it's just a case of getting through the door.
Yeah. You're better off finding just a friendly person who has one. My intention is to get one here so that I can offer essentially at cost for the community here. And we've got close a couple of times, but then it's either all or nothing. We actually have access to get a unit for about 60% of its cost. It's the one that I've been using for 4 years, and well, 3.5 years. They actually call it the MFMP's the MFMP's what is it, SEM, and the reason is it's actually a demonstrator unit for the distributor, and they're basically discounting it by year, and they'll say if we buy it, well, they'll not only give us 3.5 years worth of compounded discount, they'll actually give us all the fees that we've paid them also off it. So at some point, we're going to drive that price to zero. They'll just give it to us. We'll have to maintain it, but that's it.
When the next new model comes out, Bob.
Well, you know what? The thing is, you can go. It's what I'm saying to people. Like the SEM was basically invented in the city that I'm currently in. Certainly, some of the best ones. If you go to the Technical Museum up the road, there are ones from 1961 during the Soviet period that can do 500,000 times or more magnification, and they look like 1950s Cadillacs. They're utterly beautiful, and you turn them on and they'll work. But you don't have the flexibility that you have these days within new systems. The resolution is lower on the system that I use in Prague, the ones that you've seen so many images from. It's actually quite a lot lower than systems from the 60s during the Soviet period. So, but yeah, let's try and organize that, Rupert.
Okay, good. Because I've got some golden looking metal. I don't know what it is.
Well, I mean, if you've got copper, I mean,
no,
this whole nickel, copper, gold thing, it's something or nickel, silver,
the first
gold.
experiment I did was with brass, and I got something that looked like iron oxide from the brass.
Yeah.
When I did it with 99.99% lead, it's basically a foil. It's 0.5 millimeter thick.
Yeah.
On the edges, the EVOs have gobbled away at the edges, and I actually tried like triangular shapes because I wanted something that sort of like attracts electrons.
Yeah.
And under the microscope, definitely I've got a golden metal. I mean, it's not an oxide. It's translucent. Now I don't know what that is, but my reasoning was if you can make basically from copper you can get iron, that's knocking off 3 protons. If you knock off 3 protons from lead, you get gold. Right? So if it's some sort of like
we'll find out that sometimes it's some oxide or I see Nikita. How do I say your name, Nikita Vivok? Bobik. Let's get this fixed now, so I don't have to. How do you say it?
It's just Nikita.
Nikita. Okay, great. And your second name?
Vovk.
Vovk. Okay, so he's saying I had one spec'd out last year, XL model for work with the EDS, and was about 175,000. That's almost exactly the one that I use. It has all the bells and whistles. They've got some really cool new features that have just been introduced into software. They've actually done most of the bug fixes that I found over the last 3 years. So they've been watching my videos and my complaints, and I've been giving them a list of complaints. The biggest one that they fixed was every time it was capturing a high quality image, it would leave a counter in the middle of the image, which is the bit that you want to be focusing on. So I said, just put it anywhere, just not in the bit that's in the center of the frame. So they've done that. But yeah, so like they're offering it for about 90,000 euros now. So that's a $85,000 roughly discount on what you've probably got spec there, for the same unit. So at some point maybe we can find a way to sort that. But with your particular interest in Matsumoto's work, depending on how the Kickstarter goes, because I know Nikita has been doing some preliminary replications. He's also done some high-speed macro or even micro videography, similar to what Matsumoto did. There's a whole bunch of videos, and I've got a whole load of video equipment next door with a time-based corrector, so we can get rid of any of the missing lines and any of the jiggling. So I should be able to capture the best video that's ever been captured from those videos. And what I want to do is if I can raise the funds and go, I think we spent about 18,700 excluding time over the last 3.5, 4 years or whatever on this whole project. But I'm only asking for 8,000 to get the book done and delivered to the people that support it, because it's an all or nothing thing. If you don't get 8,000, you don't get anything. And that doesn't mean I won't produce the book. It just means that other things have to take priority, if you know what I mean. But if we can get some stretch goals, what I'd like to do is capture all those videos and then actually in the book have links to a persistent resource where those links can be then forwarded to, so that people looking at the books can actually look at the actual videos of the experiments that were actually done to create the images that are going to be so fantastic in the book. So there's, and then I'd like to do another stretch goal where we do the logbooks. So he did a logbook for the experiment, and then he did a logbook for the analysis. So when he's analyzing a little piece of metal or an X-ray film, he's actually spending like a day on a centimeter squared, and then he sketches the XY grid of each feature that he finds, just in case when he takes the photo, it's either out of focus or it doesn't develop or whatever. So he can go back to the same part of the emulsion, and we have the emulsions. And so I think logically he was thinking that if someone doesn't believe me and I die, and then they go and look at these emulsions, which he's kept, then they're going to be able to go to the XY grid on this particular emulsion and actually find the feature that he's took a photo of. So everything is verified by the indelible record. And I hadn't gone through everything. It's just such a large volume of stuff, and there's still some stuff in Japan. But there are some actual of the original witness materials, the copper pieces that he then took photos of. So, that there's a potential to not only what we're doing, which is scanning all of the original negatives and photographs and so on, and uprating the book in so many ways, but there's also a potential to go to the original material that he took the photography from and maybe find those features and image them with better technology that's available now. So it's a huge undertaking, actually. It's the most important part, in my view, of this man's life's work. So it's a large amount of work to look at it and determine what's important. But
Well, maybe we
yeah.
do a simple crowdfunder and just say the book's final price is going to be like $50, and you pay in advance, and
Well,
maybe it
that's
turns up in a
exactly
year.
what the Kickstarter is that we trailered. So like,
Right, okay.
so there is an existing book which I made a one-for-one version of here.
Yeah, I bought that.
Yeah. So, but like you'll see on the Kickstarter that there's things like this which you can't see what that is at all.
Yeah.
But we've got fantastic images of these things, like
Right.
incredible quality.
Because there's a Ken Shoulders book as well I've been reading. And
Yeah.
it's terrible black and white images. No,
Yeah, and so I actually spoke to Charles about that earlier in the week, and I said I wanted to reach out to his son and see if we can remaster that. And I would also like to include all of his other writings and some other key texts, so to make it like a Shoulders compendium. So that might be a project for next year, depending on how things go. But yeah. So, Nikita, did you want to say something particularly about what Charles is spearheading here with the DAO?
Not really. I came in late, so I just wanted to check out what was even happening because I meant to make at least one of the previous meetings and I never did. So I was just kind of trying to see what this effort is all about, really. But
well, maybe Charles, if you could just give a potted summary of what you've been doing, the intent. I can just say essentially, there's a number of people that are in a position to run with the things that the project has been doing openly. But as soon as they start focusing on a commercial venture, then the ethos of the whole MFMP falls away. People don't want to support something that is just trying to capture something, and then you lose the magic, and you end up being siloed in the same way that probably science hasn't advanced in the black world, because there's all these people that have wonderful parts of the puzzle, but they're not able to talk to each other. So to keep it open, we're setting several goals, and the idea with the DAO, from my perspective, in why I'm fully behind it, is to create minimum viable products of technologies that come out of this thing this exotic vacuum object, whatever it is, this ball lightning based technology, and the way it manipulates matter. And those things will be like, here's the protocol, here's the drawings. You go and make this a contract manufacturer, and it does what it says on the tin. And so it's like giving the base Android system, or giving the base how to make fire, the base how to do an internal combustion engine. It's not the latest greatest Bugatti, right? And so it's to give a foundation, because if we wait for the people who think that they control this information, and they're not going to give it to us. I mean, if you looked at my last presentation, I was showing almost everything that builds on this technology from a paper from 1992, like vacuum capturing of vacuum energy, changing of the permittivity of the vacuum, changing the speed of light and time effectively, in these ball lightning based structures. And I mean, that was 1992. It wasn't until September in 2000 that Ken Shoulders actually wrote a paper on permittivity transitions, right? So, and so there's this whole potential technologies where there are even technologies we use that are using this process, like HHO, like electro wire discharge machining, and even to a degree, laser steel cutting. I mean, people don't know it's going on. The coherent matter process is going on. They're just using it, right? But we want to take it from what it can potentially deliver, what it has delivered, make people understand that, and create these minimum viable products. And then from then, anyone can then go and do what they like and make a better version and make a business out of it. But it's give a grounding, so that there isn't this, oh, will it happen? Will it not happen? Can it happen? This kind of mystery. Meanwhile, these technologies exist in black programs, and we're not allowed to know about them. And they're just not going to tell us. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's 1992 and we're in 2024. Like, I will be dead, long dead, before anything happens if we wait for someone to be gracious enough to let us play with these things, right?
In drafting the Constitution, I sent some ideas to Charles. There are two fundamental functions you've got to think about. One, and absolutely, Bob, I totally agree with you, there needs to be this broad, open publication of the information, the actual academic data, the theories, and all that stuff. But if you're going to get substantial funding, you need to be able to say, yeah, there are going to be closed spaces where there's going to be secret know-how that leads to patents. And that's the only way you're going to get big development funding. And it's balancing those two sort of completely conflicting things, which, it's always going to be a dilemma.
Here's the thing, Rupert. Like, people put a patent out there, and people can follow the words of the patent, but it does not do the device. What we're offering is a minimum viable product. This is the principle we understand it to work on. You go and build this as per it's described, and it's going to work. Now, there's people that are going to have their own insights from that, and some of those insights might be shit, and they don't do anything to improve the device. But there might be people with intellectual prowess that can see something beyond what the DAO is able to create. There might even be people in the DAO that have moved on in their heads, but they need another 3 years of work. But the idea is to get out these basic products that are minimally viable, and they will solve a base need. So in case of material processing, we know that the wind hex exists. It works. You can go and buy a commercial version, but we don't want to go and buy a commercial version and reverse engineer it, because there might be intellectual property in there that we inadvertently copy. So we work off the patent which is expired. We make our own device that's shown to, efficiently preserve, sugar beet or sweet potato or paprika or, peppers or stuff into a dry or apple, whatever it is, or to recycle concrete, or to dustify glass and aluminium so that they can be used in secondary processes. And that's the minimum viable product. Now, someone might then come along and make a specific version of that, which is essentially what Kraft Foods did. They bought the patent off Frank Polivka, and then they developed 3 more variations of the patent and extended the patent from then. And then they put it into use in food production. And so that's the kind of thing. It's like, it's terrible to have this potential of these tools and these things that, for instance, Ken Shoulder said, but other people have obviously said in their own way, understanding it from a different perspective in the past. And yet we're still scratching around with chemical rockets. And on that note, I'm going to interject here before Charles can take over and give his viewpoint on what this is about. I saw Kai Trump's video, which was quite fantastic, of Trump watching the Flight 6 with Elon Musk. And Trump's like really looking a little bit nonplussed. He's like going like that as the rocket's going up. And I'm thinking, for about 3 or 4 years, I've been calling what in America they call someone who's just a plant, like a beard. Like Musk is a beard. Now I don't know whether he is or he isn't. He might not even know he's a beard, but he's doing Neuralink, he's doing boring, energy storage, energy production, and vertical takeoff and landing. And these are all technologies that can be delivered by EVO Technologies. So I've been thinking somehow, some way, for the last 4 years, I've been saying he's going to get into a position where he's going to be given these technologies and they're going to be released. And he's going to be the person that naturally would have been the person that everyone agrees automatically he's trying to do VTOL. He does a different type of VTOL. Does a boring to make tunnels like Ken Shoulders was doing through Illumina, and he just does it. And it's just like a natural progression. It looks like he really did invent it. And it's not going to be that. And I'm thinking, God, this is it. They're right neck and neck with each other. Trump wants to release these technologies. He wants this fair next year or whatever it is. And who better to do it through? Because it was his uncle, John Trump, that went and took the Tesla papers that are most of them are classified until 100 years after Tesla's death.
Right.
And I just thought, oh my God, that's how it's going to happen. If it's going to happen, and that's pure speculation. And I'm sorry, Elon, if you're not a beard, but certainly the writing seems to be. I'd be surprised if you're not the person that invent these technologies, invent them. Anyway, I've said my piece.
Well, I'd like to say something. If you saw this hypersonic missile attack on Dnipro by the Russians, I'm a bit suspicious about I know it's a plasma sheet which is being used to deliver those missiles through the atmosphere. But the level of destruction they're talking about makes me begin to be suspicious. It's more than kinetic energy.
Oh, the man who we probably shouldn't mention because the YouTube stream will be cut. But basically the leader of the country there, he says when we launched it into this place in the middle of nowhere. He says, but if we drop this on Kiev, the buildings will just turn into dust.
Yeah. Well, then you and I understand what we're talking about.
Okay? We both know what it is. Yeah.
Okay. That's what I want to say.
And he was very clear about that. He repeatedly said, you've never seen anything like this, and it's basically as effective as a nuclear weapon, but it completely converts all the buildings into dust.
Yeah. Yeah. So but you see, this is there are a number of things that really push people's buttons. That's one of them. This is competitive weapons technology. Sorry. The other one is extreme profit, and, those are things which will really drive this organization. You don't want it to go into the dark side, but I'm just saying
the weapons are already there. And if you heard Trump the other day, he says, if we need to, we're going to use these weapons that the previous leaders have refused to use.
Yeah.
Right. Because no one wants to reveal their weapons, but you've got Putin has showed two. He's showed the Kinzhal, and he's shown this one, which means Oreshnik or something. It's the little catkins, the seeds, flower pots, which is what it looks like when it's coming down from the sky. Trump used the weapons in 2017 in June in Syria.
Yeah.
And we know that because Jenna Musa, a Arabic journalist, on Twitter said, when the Americans are going to drop what the ISIS calls the electricity bombs, and they have no other name for them. That's because of what they do. That's what they call them. We're phoned by the US military and asked to put any piece of metal on our body and any electronics onto the ground and stand away from it effectively. And then in the next frame, she shows one of her colleagues holding up an ISIS sword, and it looks like it's been at the bottom of the ocean for about 30 years.
Yeah.
And we know the signatures. This is the technology was used to defeat ISIS in a couple of weeks, and it's just, you know, it's next level. So we that's the decision I made in 2017. I know the weapons have already been made, and obviously there's, according to Bearden, most of the understanding was there in Brazil, UK, Russia, Israel, US, China, South Korea, and Japan in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
So like everyone's kept the peace. And I genuinely think what's going on right now is they're trying to bait Putin to launch his weapons, because you can't use this technology to take them out when they're in a silo, but you can make them disappear when they're in the sky. So you can unilaterally disarm a country, but against their will.
Yeah.
You just get them to all launch, but it's an incredibly risky game, because if your technology doesn't deliver on every single unit, but they might let a few land, and you know, so like these boys with their toys, they got them. And my viewpoint in the beginning of 2017 is that I have to accept that. Do I walk away from this field and don't push it out? And I thought, no, Ken Shoulder's work needs to have an airing. People need to understand what this is and what it can do, because I don't want these people holding dominion over us, holding these ultimate weapons, you know, to just do party tricks, and we're all lied to about what actually happened.
Yeah.
So that is, and so we must accept that they're not going to give it to us, because they've had them for, so in certain aspects, they've had them for at least 60 or 70 years. Okay. They're not going to give them to us. So we have to do this ourselves. And we mustn't worry about the bad bits, because most of the players have already got the bad bits. And they're just choosing what to reveal.
Sure.
Because once you reveal something, you show that it's possible. Because, like, except for idiots that think when they see something turning to dust, they think it's, you know, aviation fuel or something. You know.
Yeah.
Right. I'll shut up at that point. Charles.
Message sent. Well done.
Hi.
So what for the case of Nikita, who doesn't work at a national lab at all, can you explain to him what it is from your point of view?
Sure. So we're creating an incubator for experimentalists, innovators who would like to open source devices once they reach a stage of a minimal viable product. We're going to be providing funding routes so people can come and fund these innovators, the experimenters, and we will also assist with project management assistance. The project management assistance will enable health and safety documents, anything that you would need to release said product as an MVP or a replication kit, whatever it is. We will get you to that point. We will release it all open source, and we will try to pay for as much of it as we possibly can. That is what the DAO has been set up to do, and we want it all to be open, free, available to everyone, and a real community effort to do.
Just addressing what Charles was saying, and Rupert, you said something about the enormous profit that's available. I think presumably the strategy would be, if you were an outside entity wanting to invest in whatever we produce, would be that once the open sourcing had occurred and the MVP was available, you'd simply take the knowledge, modify it to the extent that you could patent it, and then profit from it. This is what I'm assuming. Is that what everybody else feels is the likely outcome?
Yeah, I from my point of view, I have no problem. And like, you can have a design patent. You can make a phone that looks like everyone else's phone, except it's got round corners, and you can make a design patent on that. And if the customers want to buy the one with the round corners, or it's got the right paint job or whatever it is, and that's where they go, that's great. But the point is to get everyone over the hurdle of an actual functioning technology. You know, I learned from this, like, so for instance, my brother, you might have seen these fan screens, you know, they're advertising vapes and stuff typically, right? My brother invented that. And the bank that I was working for, Standard Chartered Bank, they gave 100 million or whatever it is check to a company in China to actually make a factory to build the clones of my brother's products, right? And they make much better ones, and they're all over the world now, you know. And so, but my brother made the minimum viable product. It showed what was possible, right? And that's it. Once you've seen it and you know you can do it, then everyone can start putting their creative juices on and building forward from that. But if you don't know something can fly, if you don't think you can make a video images over electromagnetic waves, if you don't know something is possible, then you can't build on that possibility. And so it's basically taking the society to a next level using this, what I call the God's toolbox.
Rupert, does that sort of work with the idea of massive investment from the outside coming in?
I mean, I agree with the motives and direction of Bob, in the sense that, yeah, we first absolutely need to disseminate information, and we need to sort of create the fertile ground for people to create things. Okay. But still, if you're dealing with any sort of venture capital or anything like that, they're going to say, what's the intellectual property? What is the thing that we're investing in? It's not just
and is it sufficient, do you think, to say, well, take it, modify it, and patent that?
In principle. I mean, again, Charles has seen the thing I wrote. You've got to find some balance between these two things. This academic publishing, educational activity, and if you want to get, I mean, moderate type of kitchen level development, no problem at all. People can do it with their own limited resources, but any sort of industrial scale something is going to require who owns what, and unfortunately.
For sure, Rupert, but that's why we're choosing the projects we're choosing, because, for instance, when you're replicating the Kladoff cavitator, the patent has already expired. When you're replicating the Frank Pilivka Wintex, the patent has already expired. When you're inventing a charge cluster energy generating device, that was defined by Ken Shoulders in his patents and even developed onto how you should do it, right? And so what we're doing is we're just making viable products out of patents which no one can patent again. So it's like what you're actually enabling the operability of those patents for anything other than the person that's already dead.
Yeah, agreed. It's agreed. Absolutely agreed. I mean, it's absolutely vital. I mean, I wouldn't have been even in this field at all. That's you, Bob, because your inspirational, educational activity, which made me think, I'm going to try this. Does it work? Something happen. Something happens. I'm going, wow. And where I am now is, okay, I think I mentioned in an earlier meeting that I'm looking at porphyrin as a catalyst, and something seems to happen. I mean, if you put, porphyrins, iron porphyrins into these water cavitation experiments, they seem to go faster. All right. And that's a little micro sort of magnet, right? Maybe that's helping
well,
I mean, come to life.
What I found with the ultra experiments is a lot of the aluminium foil that you get actually has minute flecks of iron in. But the iron gets ripped out by these structures. And if you stop it at 90 seconds, you end up with these, like, it looks like one of those knot pieces of art where you're actually made like loads of different types of knots out of a big thick rope, and it starts twisting together. And then not much longer after that, it's progressing towards the iron-rich crenellated spheres. And I was initially disappointed when I found the iron, but I realized it doesn't matter whether it's producing the iron or it's grabbing the iron, which we obviously saw it was doing in the thunderstorm generator. It's showing an incredible magnetic force that is able to, in a very short period of time, create a hollow crenellated microsphere, which is fully vitrified on the inside and is this crenellations on the outside with this golden ratio between the two, and it's hollow, and it's in water in the case of it. And so how are you creating this pure iron sphere effectively? And that is just magic in my view, but it's actually it's the collapsed coherent matter from the core. And that is just amazing that something so simple in water can do that. But obviously, the material came out of Binja and Huang's reactor was totally next level because it's showing how it's grabbing it in, it's showing how it's spitting it out as new elements and stuff. So, yeah. So,
So what I'm
the
saying
guy,
is,
I was speaking to a guy today, and they saying, well, like,
yeah.
you know, in fact, it was Charles. He was talking about transmutation, and I said, like, no one really wants to do this. And I sent this video that I talked about 6.5 years ago about this group that actually spent 11 years investigating Ken Shoulder's work and proved conclusively, and they could do it every day of the week, that one shot of an EVO reduced the target activity by a half, which is basically producing a half life. So if you did cesium-137, that's like 30 something years half life. If you're reducing that to one half of the activity, you're actually doing one half life, but you're doing it in one impact. And so they had this whole situation where in 2010, the Obama administration had come in, and there's the Wu, or whatever his name was, the Chinese, I think his sounding name was the Secretary of Energy, and they invited him in, but someone whispered in his ear, and then they shut it all down, and they told them don't speak about this. And so, you know, it's just it's not going to come from the government down.
Right.
It's not going to. Every time ball lightning has been mentioned, it's been shut down by the U.S. Navy. I'll call them out. It's the U.S. Navy. Now, why would they want to shut down any talk about ball lightning? I've said it many times before, so whatever. Come on, U.S. Navy, spill the beans.
Yeah, I think for most people, working radioactive materials, though, to transformation is beyond. Well, I mean, there are licenses involved in just handling materials, but non-radioactive materials and doing transmutation, that's cool. If you can demonstrate that as a reliable
Well, I have
process.
over there, and I need to send it off to Lithuania. I have the core that I ran in the supernova reactor for 3 minutes during the alternative. I actually ran it. I've been so scared of the strange radiation, I hadn't run it for 4 years, but I ran it,
Right.
and we ran it live with people at some distance, and I'll share the videos of that.
Right.
But I'm going to send some of the control material off and the other material, and if the carbon-14 is any less than, like, it should be 6 years old on the normal ground up charcoal. It should be about 6 years old, which basically registers as today. But if the other one's anything like more than 6 years old, then it's conclusive. And this experiment's so easy to do. It'd be like, well, do you want to verify it? Because, like, you can come in, you can bring your own charcoal and do your own beamline a measurement of carbon-14, and you're gonna see the same result. So this will conclusively prove two things. One, just ball lightning and exotic vacuum objects produced by microwaves can produce transmutation of beta isotopes. And two, that strange radiation can do the same thing in your body and smash up the 1 in a trillion carbon-14 atoms that are part of the sugar molecules that make up your DNA strands. And so it proves both the positive and the case for shielding. Okay. And so with the video that I shared with the last Russian meeting but one, Anatoly Klimov, who designed the plasma sheath devices, effectively, as far as I'm aware, it's him. You can go back to his research in the 70s and 80s. It's even on his research gate. He's the guy that did the laser out in front to produce the plasma sheath, and it's probably his work that has led to the weapons being able to fly as fast as they can. But he mentioned to Ed Lewis, who was the guy who was working with the early cold fusion people, who then realized that this is like micro ball lightning. It was him that told Matsumoto that maybe what he was producing was something like ball lightning, and Matsumoto came to agree with him. And then when he did start to publish that, he was shut down. Klimov says, Pietro Kapitsa, he produced ball lightning electrodeless, totally different from the way that Matsumoto was producing it. and he used microwaves, standing waves, and of course in his 1950s paper he describes how he views it in his phase conjugation, and he says it's on the antinodes that they form, and it's transverse. He says parallel to the ground, but that is transverse to the wave coming in and reflecting. And then he says, so that you're making these micro ball lightning and ball lightning, and he did that. And then Ed Lewis says, well, did he get any transmutation? And I've not seen this research published anywhere, and I need to write to Anatoly to get him to send it. But he said, yes, he fused deuterium into helium.
Right.
So that is using phase conjugated waves in a medium to produce free floating ball lightning that can be trapped on the antinodes that will then fuse matter and produce fusion level energies in free space. And he said that's done. So like the idea that you can't use this, I mean, Matsumoto had a proposal in 2000 to the Linear Accelerator Conference, because he was an expert in that before he became interested in what cold fusion might have been, to remediate nuclear waste using his microball lightning itonic clusters. Exactly the same way. It's David Yerth, the person I was referring to earlier. So we've got Ken Shoulders, David Yerth, Takaaki Matsumoto, and they're all saying with the ball lightning you can do these things, and clearly you can.
Yeah. Well,
So
I mean,
we're in this laughable situation right now.
I mean, you could design quite simple experiments like P32, which is very commonly used in biological laboratories, beta emitter. I mean, if you could show that you can basically shut down its radioactivity, you know, that's an experiment. You know?
Yeah, I just think it's easier with crust charcoal.
Right.
Because it's something that it's not quite at the simplicity of the ultra experiment or Matsumoto's little lead wire exploding like for a couple of millisecond detations, as it were. But it's so simple that extremely large numbers of labs could do it quite easily.
Yeah.
Rupert, could I just ask something? Your porphyrin experiment, did you try leaving them out in the sun? Because there is quite a lot of medical evidence that porphyrins spontaneously change when they're placed in solar radiation situations for a period of time. And I'd be very interested to know why the color change occurs, whether it's chemical or anything else.
I got the iron porphyrin from Merck. It's actually Sigma Aldrich. It's actually produced in China. I've been storing it in the dark at -20, and only when I get it out to use it. So what I'm saying is it's not heavily exposed to UV or.
Has it gone pink yet?
No, it's black. It's black.
Okay, great. Try seeing what sunshine does to it. I'd be very interested to know. It may be that there is something that is well known in medicine that is related to what we've been talking about.
I mean, the big problem is actually solubility. It's a bugger to see. You basically get into solution with sodium hydroxide, but if you do that, you know, and I'm trying to do this thing with lead, that you end up solubilizing the lead if you're not careful. But I'm just playing around. This is cookery. This is scientific.
I'm doing exactly the same thing with water. My wife thinks I'm nuts. Bob, talking of which, can we put aside a little time just to talk about holy water, please?
Not in this presentation. I'll do it
absolutely
later.
Outside the presentation.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you on the chat line and see.
Yeah, obviously, there's this story going about with Andrea Rossi's ECAT. I said in my last presentation that I was probably 80% confident that it's real. I think I'm about 90% confident.
It's highly plausible, isn't it now?
Certain things have happened, and yeah, I think it's about 90%.
Well, I've had my order in for nearly 10 years, I think now, for one. So
I've had 2 orders in, and I've been through. I'm on my second household boiler, since I made my orders for 2. So like, yeah. No, I'm not talking about the original. I'm talking about the current manifestation.
We're going to have to paint them, aren't we, with colloidal silver and
It's going to need
paint.
shielding. It absolutely certainly produces the radiation.
The Russian recipe was rubber paint with colloidal silver in it, wasn't it?
It's
Latex and colloidal silver.
latex, silver powder, and a phosphor. Either the two examples given were zinc sulfide and strontium aluminate.
So whatever we get will be luminous eventually before we can use it on the inside.
Yeah, I mean, you might be able to get that. You might be able to make the energy generators nice garden features, which keep the garden glowing at night.
Yes,
I'm pretty sure, and I'm pretty sure that with a little bit of effort, so it's going to be able to be replicated. I believe before it's actually made public. I'm pretty sure about that. So Rossi has to get this out the door, and I hope that the partner that he seems to have found a partner that means that he doesn't have to worry about all the individual investors, which is the right way to go. Because you don't really want 1 million people sending you £25 and making 1 million units. You want one big customer. If anyone's done any kind of box shifting, and I have, you don't want 1 million people to have to answer to. You want one person to answer to, or a few. So the way he's sounding right now, his latest dog and pony show, which I actually don't think now is a dog and pony show. Specifically, there's certain things that he said that he calls the 100 kilo unit, of which he says 88 kilos is the actual countermass. He calls it countermass, right? Now, if he's got the system working the way I think it should be, it would be a propulsion device. And so you'd want a countermass to deal with the fact that it's trying to go off in a different direction all by itself.
Wow.
So the second thing is it's made of steel or mild steel, the countermass, and that is the fuel that the Russians said in 1992 that they extract the energy from. Sufficient that 1 kilo is enough to take them to Alpha Centauri and back, and that the electron accelerator structure that does the extraction of the hidden energy within matter is also a propulsion device. So I think that if he had arranged his device sideways, the car might have gone faster or slower depending on where the vectors were pointing.
Wow.
It might have been marginal, but he obviously thought it was enough to warrant 88 kilos to stop it. And then the third option is it's just shielding, because he suffered twice from cancer and had to have some surgery.
His particular type of cancer was melanoma, I believe, and that is suggestive.
Well, he had throat cancer as well. So yeah.
Those are both suggestive of.
Well, when Ken Shoulders died of multiple cancers, and as I know what Matsumoto died of. Let's put it this way, Nikita, please have some shielding, or dilution is the solution, pollution, keep yourself at a distance. You know, because the reason I didn't run the supernova reactor is because the guy that built it died of breast cancer at 40. Right, so I'm deadly serious. So like when I send this carbon off, this charcoal off, if it comes back with any level of aging on the sample that ran for 3 minutes, then we have to be seriously focusing on the shielding. The shielding is absolutely critical with all of these technologies, and we can shield for it. The Russians have done the hard work. They've shown, don't put lead on it; it makes it worse. Lead is not the solution to this. What?
It's vital for a review paper on the safety question, because just pulling together all the information, because I remember in a lab, I was using B32 and they said, oh, just use this perspex, it'll stop the beta. It doesn't. Bullshit. So yeah, but that's vital, because if people start working in this area, we don't want to start, mincing up their DNA or whatever it's going to be.
No. But it's no worse than someone that's using a welding plant or hangs around microwaves too long, or has a mobile phone, or uses a device that spins too fast. Any of those things will produce this radiation. but does it produce the radiation as fast as things that are actually producing ball lightning? I don't worry about the ball lightning itself when it's stable and fed enough electrons. I worry when it breaks up.
It's the neutral ones, isn't it? The ones without charge that are.
Yeah, but like the point is you don't know what component of the neutral of the big one that's not neutral breaks up and it becomes a neutral fragment. So like because the substructures are more coherent than the overall big one. The reason the big one breaks up is because either it's got more than 48 subdivisions, or because it's over energized. And Ken Shoulder says, like, if you feed it more than 2 electron volts, if it receives at the point of its surface, you can disrupt it because that's like this threshold for it. But if the big one is more unstable than the subquanta, and we know this for a fact. You just need to look at Leonid Aritskyev's work, where he does the exploding titanium foil, and he shows the picture of the big ball lightning forming outside of the water, outside of the polymer, outside of the aluminium chamber, right? It's above, and he has a mirror above, so you can see it from above and from front on. And then a few milliseconds later, the ball lightning splits up into loads of little micro ball lightning. So the micro ball lightning must be small. It's more stable than the bigger structure. It stands to reason. It might be that the bigger structure is fragmenting and it's reconnecting the plasma loop. So those are possibilities, and that's what I'm saying. You get these fragments that come out, which are the bits that can potentially be neutral and go into your body. You don't want that.
Bob, how close are we to developing something that would be a predictable calibrated generator of, say, neutral fragments?
Well, we know that the Parkhomov woodpecker does, but if you don't have sufficient energy, you can't release the hidden energy within matter to make them from things. Because he had a sparker, and the sparker, when it made the connection, it made the induction coil lift it up like a solenoid. So it sparked and lifted, sparked and lifted, sparked and lifted. And so he would see transmutation there, but they would observe the strange radiation out to about 22 centimeters. But after a while, it stopped producing radiation. And this is the problem that also Shishkin had with his rotary cavitator. It produced a lethal amount of radiation in an hour to a man. They wouldn't die immediately. They'd die of cancer later, right? But he found that after a while, it stopped producing any of this radiation whatsoever. And he had to lift it up and take it to a different part of his lab and plonk it down. Because it's literally using it's condensing all of the dark matter, all of the chi out of an event horizon. And it depends on the size of the device. So, when you're running a Windhex, you probably want to run it outside and have no one near it whilst it's operating.
And that, Bob, is what I want to talk to you about outside this meeting.
Right.
Exactly
Okay.
that.
So, but the point is that after a while, if you're outside, because there's no walls or whatever, the chi will come in, the feng shui will work, and it'll rebalance itself. We know this because of what Xu Wenju did. He had a brass sheet, which obviously has spin nuclei of copper 63 and 65 and zinc 67. And he had torsion beams on it in a 3-body alignment when the relic neutrinos are partially being occluded by the moon, let's say. He saw a sideways pressure. He didn't know what it was, but the sideways pressure is because of the relic neutrino flux, because he got less underneath, because the Earth has already condensed that in the actual form of gravity, right? It sucked the stuff that's between the Earth and the moon. It's rarefied that, but there's still stuff that's raining down and diffracting around the outside, and that comes in and diffuses in from the side, so it produces a sideways pressure. It's the same as the Foucault pendulum in 1954 or whatever it was by Maurice Allais. It's on NASA's website. You saw the deviation during a 3-body alignment. The other thing is you can mix up the environment and then torsion fields that are created by using a high intensity Tesla disruptive discharge, like a unipolar arc from big Tesla coil. That smashes it all up.
Just going back to earlier discussion about publications, I think we need a health and safety review publication. I think it'd be a really good idea.
Yeah. And I think what's great about this work is it's going to solve the problem that welders have.
Yeah.
It's going to solve the problem that people that move near very large, high rate of spinning metal objects.
Yeah.
You know, if someone's working on a lathe, they're probably exposed to this radiation all of the time.
Sure.
And nobody has really done the statistics, have they? Let's face it.
Well, they
If
don't
you
even
don't
know
know,
it
you don't
exists.
know
They
it's
don't
there,
even
you
know
don't
to
look
look.
for it.
If you can't see the
No,
wood for the trees, you're not going to get the wood, are you?
no. But I have to say I've taken a fair few melanomas off welders for sure.
Oh,
More than the
really?
average. Oh yeah.
Really?
Well,
Tell me more.
my job was before I finished. I was a private skin doctor. I was a melanoma specialist, and I excised a lot of them. But you do see them in welders. It's they turn up quite frequently, and it's because they've had a lot of casual
UV?
welding when they don't use a mask. The ones who are very good with masks tend not to, but the casual welders who like goggles or just look away while they're doing it, those are the ones who come in, and we see a lot of them. And the damage is really quite specific and quite interesting.
Go
And
on.
well, there's nothing much to say really. Melanomas, once they form, look like all the other cancers in the body. But yes, cutting them out is a memorable experience because they tend to be around the face and neck, of course, the head
Right.
and neck, which involves plastics, which is always an awkward situation. But anyway, no, it's very interesting. And yes, just anecdotally, I've definitely seen it in welders.
Right.
Definitely.
Right.
And I have
I
a
mean,
relative
a lot of
welder.
people would say that's because it's UV light and it's highly ionizing radiation, but
Absolutely. There are too many other factors to confound it. I mean, you'll find them in the right side of the face of lorry drivers, but only UK ones. American lorry drivers, it'll be the left side of the face.
no way.
Of course, yeah. It's obvious, isn't
That
it?
is incredible data you've just delivered there.
Well, it's not data. It's widely known. It's almost,
Well,
anecdotal in the
it is
community.
data.
Oh,
Even
okay.
even anecdotes like George Eagley did 10 years of ball lightning studies, and they were all anecdotes.
Mm. Anyhow, that is my experience. So for taking for what it is, but
So
yeah,
lorry drivers
in the
respect.
UK, the right side of the face gets more than the exposure to UV than the left, and they get
Do you
quite
mean it's just from the sun?
well, I don't know, Bob. It could be all sorts of things, couldn't it?
Well, there's a
Yeah,
left-hand and right-hand
Possibly.
drive, isn't it?
yeah,
So
yeah,
your
yeah. Oh,
face
yeah, I
is
know.
against the window.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
It's very interesting, but nonetheless, it's just anecdotal stuff as far as doctors are concerned.
yeah,
But we
yeah,
all
yeah,
know it.
yeah. Well, there we go. Thank you for sharing. Right, I'm going to see if there's any comments in the chat on YouTube, unless you've been tracking that, Charles. You look like you have. Yeah, you're not able to hear you.
No questions that I've seen recently.
They're just having a nice discussion there. We've got 62 people currently
It's
in
amazing.
the on the YouTube there, which is very good considering it was only tailored just before. So that's great. Alex, you came in late. Is there something you wanted to ask?
Can you
Alex?
hear me?
Yes.
Oh, lovely. Well, I've got a billion questions, but there's one in particular that relates to the EVO DAO and the first presentation you did. You mentioned there was a timeline project being done by somebody, and I found that very fascinating how it related to Leonard Bot and basically creating a timeline of many discoveries throughout science.
Mhm.
I was wondering who was handling that and how I could collaborate with him.
Sure, sir. His screen name is OD1EX or something similar to that. He is in the chat in YouTube at the moment. If you send me an email, which is in the presentation at the start and the end, I can link you up with him in the real world without his screen name if he's happy to do that, and I'm sure he would be no problem.
And so yeah,
Thank
Alex,
you.
just to say, it was originally hopefully going to be based on as a stretch goal for the Matsumoto book to do a timeline of his life, but do it in such a way that we can bolt in Shoulder's work, Tesla's work, Mizuno's work, and whoever else, and then I would like it to have some kind of back end that contributors can come in, not like Wikipedia where it just becomes a bit wonky, but like there are people that can come in and be responsible for entering, a particular researcher's work, and so it's not all relying on my time and Odd One X's time, And so if we can get above 25,000 on the Kickstarter, it would be my dream. I want to have a chunk of money for Odd1X to reward him, because he's actually made the lena-bot.com, and he's also doing he actually wants to turn this into a course in the US to teach people about the history and so on, and the potential for the future of this field. And that's great. And he deserves to be able to do that because of all of the work he's done. And I think he's the right person with the right skill set to do the base framework coding. And but it's going to take a lot of people putting stuff in there, as it were.
Thank you so much. I really look forward to contributing to that, and I think I get your vision better. I'm looking forward to meeting him. And I have a ton of timeline stuff I think will fit right into place, because finding the origins of this technology, I feel that's where we really nail down the specifics and create the right vocabulary so we can spread the message and develop on it further. That's all from me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alex. Sophia, I can't remember whether I know who you are or not, but is there something you wanted to say? Are you there? Okay. Laszlo, did you want to ask something?
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Laszlo.
Yeah, I asked a few questions about technical details about the DLTs we are going to use. So we just connected on LinkedIn with Charles, and I wanted to exchange some ideas, some questions, some details.
Okay, great. Martin, do you have anything you want to ask? Asterios? What is your name, in fact? I love your background there. It's what wonderful swirliness going on. Yes, almost a yin-yangy. Yeah, very good. Okay, Martin. Yeah, is there something you wanted to ask? Any questions you have?
I have many. I was going over your intro to advanced energy systems presentation after your most recent stream on infinite potential. One of the interesting things, well, there were many. Give me a moment and I'll organize that a little better.
Okay. Sure. Okay, Charles, do you just want to run through the points of the meeting today? Summarize where we are.
Sure. Yeah. So we've just been doing some work over the last 3 weeks. We've come along a long way, launched our treasury. We're dialing down on exactly what we can do at the moment. We're waiting for Charmverse to finish doing their iteration. Then we're going to fork whatever they've done and bring in some lovely user experience and user interface stuff and make sure nobody needs to know what's going on the back end. We'll be onboarding projects in the next 60 days. So there'll be much more information about the projects that you'll be able to fund and contribute to. And there'll be more information about where we're going to be going in the future and what you'll be able to interact with. So yeah, it's a really exciting time, and I can't wait to present again on the 7th of January.
Awesome. 7th of January. That is what day? Is that a Tuesday?
I think so.
That's Tuesday. Yeah. So I've got Fasted asking what percentage of firefighters got cancer from something. Okay. So do you have those questions for us now, Asteros? Pick your top three, and then we'll close out.
Okay. Well, you had mentioned perhaps a presentation coming after that introduction to advanced energy systems regarding the pyramid specifically, and how it would be used as a machine to generate coherent matter or something like this.
Yeah, so I talked a bit about that on the Matt Bell podcast. If you can go and have a look at the one there, there's a fairly large chunk of about 40 minutes to 45 minutes where I talk through that. You can go back to my original presentation where I introduced that was a couple of years ago, called A New Dawn of an Old Age, on MFMP's YouTube channel. You should listen to that. Was about 3 hours, and there was another 3 hour presentation directly 5 minutes before that ended 5 minutes before that, called Ode Another Dimension, and that's the first time that I revealed the basic three-dimensional structure of O. I hadn't got the cone exactly right. I derived it from experimental evidence, and then it seemed to be quite close to the Shakhparanoff monopoles created by the Mobius strip, and so I was fairly happy with that. It wasn't until I had some people reaching out to me and saying that, maybe it's this, take a circle and reduce it by the golden ratio and put it on top, and then do that a couple of times, and then there was various interpretations, but it turns out that it's on the full diameter, and then you draw a circle that goes around like that, and it turns out that the Sothic triangle, as represented by the Egyptians, of a 22 unit long string that you then to 4 pegs, so 2 pegs that are 4 units across, and then you get the string and you put it, and then you just pull it up so that you've got the 4 pegs down here, and these are both 9. That gives you a good approximation for a mason to be able to chisel one out. That you wouldn't want to have a more complicated thing to tell a mason, and apparently this is in the Temple of Osiris, how to draw the Sothic triangle from a 22. So but that isn't accurate to what nature produces, but it's pretty close. It's as wrong as mine one was, if you know, from experiment. And the other thing I learned is that the top of the Sothic triangle, not the bit where we see the circle in the center of the substructure below where the matter is destroyed, which is the subterranean level. The top of the Sothic triangle, where if you draw a circle in there, which is above the circle that we see on our samples, the point between the top of the apple and the center of the yin yang, and the yin yang and that circle there is exactly and precisely the golden ratio. And then when you look at the other structures coming in from the outside, when you do the 4 and you have 3 and then you separate them, the actual size between the bigger one and the smaller one internally, which you see on an ultra experiment exactly and precisely, and you also see in the what I call, it's an experiment that Henk Uren did for me, which I call cardioid infarction, but it's basically where you see the material going through a wormhole and coming out. The actual bit that's displaced is exactly curved on this outer ring, and on the inner ring it's the full dome, and outside of that is completely flat. And those ratios are also golden ratios. So when you understand that this magnetohydrodynamic structure has all golden ratios throughout it, and on the basic 2D, and then you start making it in 3D, and it means like every fractal level down, it's got the golden ratio. You can understand how nature organizes itself in the way that it does. And this is something that Leonardo da Vinci mused over when looking at the Flower of Life, which is also at the Temple of Osiris, etched onto those stones in some fashion. And he did so much, but nature has one way of doing things, and it's beautiful. And any departure from that, you're just working against nature. And that is it. And so that presentation was showing the first 3D version, which I had in my head for about 3 years, because I've been doing 3D since 17. So I was modeling everything in my head, and I go, all right, I've got to actually do this model. And when I started overlaying the model by changing the orthogonal axis, I was just utterly blown away when it represented a German researcher's bubble structures in water. It represented the spiral galaxy in the Hubble Space Telescope and the James Webb Telescope. And then it represented the ultra experiments, but it also represented things in the Lion reactor. It represented and it's all the same kind of features. And then if you wanted to represent anything else, you just needed to do the different level of fractality. And so I just feel like the luckiest man alive. in that. So if you watch that, it's called Ode Another Dimension, and then the presentation after Wiz. But I will do more detail on that. In fact, that was going to be my presentation at the Cosmic Summit. I was going to focus on the pyramid entirely, but I didn't because I was doing other things. Yeah. So, if anyone has it doesn't have any questions, I'm going to say,
Yeah.
Laszlo, you've got a question.
Yes, just one question. You mentioned shortly the new weapon, so the Oreshnik. And
Yeah.
I was wondering when I saw those videos whether this was a directed energy weapon or something which includes plasma technology, as it was weaponized in 7 as well. Because all the military experts seem not to see it like that, so they're just talking about normal kinetic weapons and rockets flying through the air, even if it's Mach 11 or something like that.
Laszlo, what you can see very clearly is no one has gone to the trouble of showing what damage it did.
Yeah, actually, they showed that it didn't do any damage as a normal round. So
Yeah.
there were satellite pictures from the next day
Yeah,
showing
so they basically said it was a dummy load.
Yeah.
So he said, but like when we do this properly, it'll turn buildings to just fragments of dust. Is what the leader said. And when you see that coming down, I mean, it was 6 times 6. It was 36 structures that came down from one missile. So you could imagine that they were not very powerfully spun up ones. I would imagine these are basically mother of all ball lightning, but it's pure speculation. But since we know that ball lightning can turn stuff to dust and make it disappear, because we've done both in our experiments, and so is Ken Shoulders and so is Matsumoto. Like, so we know it can do this. If you don't spin it up, it's still going to glow enough. So if you fire a bunch of these down, and we know that a stable structure is 4, but more stable is 6. So if you had a unit that was able to produce 6 structures, and when you broke those up, they came down as 6 substructures. But they're just not spun up, so they wouldn't do any damage. But they put on a nice light.
Not on the surface, or not on the top of the buildings.
Sorry, what?
At least not on the surface, or not.
No, if it hits the surface, the charge is going to dissipate into the ground. So are you saying that I haven't seen these pictures you're referring to, but is it just a flat piece of ground?
No. Actually, they say we don't see any damage on the buildings on the next day if the satellite pictures are really fine.
Right.
Yeah, there are actually conflicting reports. I've heard different people saying different things. I've said some people saying, yes, it's high level of damage. I mean, I haven't actually seen any pictures of the ground after the attack. I don't know if there are those pictures. You know, but...
I think what the leader said was, I think we made our message clear. So, like,
we could do damage.
It's the fog of war. If they'll lie to get you into a war, they're definitely not going to tell you when someone has shown a weapon that you have no defenses against, it does some ridiculous damage, or it's even more confusing if it does no damage at all. And then the leader comes out and says, if this was operable, it'll turn any building to dust. Like, you got to. It's almost like he's showing his hand without showing his hand. It's like saying,
I was just wondering what the 11 Mach means, because as you explained, I think it is also possible to create these orbs anywhere remotely by scalar interferometry. So actually, you don't need any physical rockets flying through the air with 10 Mach or whatever speed.
No,
but they can just do it wherever they want, and they can also move much faster than 10 Mach if it's just energy. So I was not sure whether it's just a bluff or some misleading information, so that people think it's a normal kinetic weapon. I'm not sure.
I mean, we know what the structures can do, and there's going to be different ways to deliver them. There might be good reasons why you'd want to use a ballistic and re-entry vehicle to initiate them, because you don't have a fixed thing that you know where it came from that you can attack. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
because the point about the Orishnik is they can be on mobile launchers, they can be underground, pop out, drive to somewhere, and you literally have no idea where they are, and they can launch and they do their business, and that's it. If you had a facility on the ground or a satellite, all these things can be dealt with. You only need the first one to emit it, and you know where it came from. So.
So you mean if you have some stable stations doing the scalar interferometry, then that would be able to be localized.
Well, that's what happened to the Duga arrays, didn't they? According to uh, what's his name, Tom Bearden, the Duga array, which is 111-meter high, so-called over the horizon radar, 4 kilometers from reactor 4 at Chernobyl, was energizing using scalar interferometry with 2 other Duga arrays, the San Andreas fault, and they were already starting to get earthquakes. And so they didn't, there's no satellites at the time. So but they did have a phase conjugated array, which is interesting. And it's basically like retroreflective 3M Scotch tape, the stuff you put on your back of your helmet when you're riding, it reflects the light directly back to where it came from. So if you've got electromagnetic waves, it comes over, it reflects it back exactly back to where it came from. And so they thought, well, if you're going to feel this energy, we're going to fire it back to the transmitter. And the story is that, according to Tom Bearden, is that caused the thing to basically get charge clusters build up in the array, and that they had this as an accident that happened before, according to Tom Bearden. They drained them into the ground because they had these special drains, but it oversaturated, and it travels at 2 to 3 centimeters per second. And if you do the calculations between when they hit back the energy back to the Duga array and when the reactor went off, it just basically fissioned all the material. And if you go and look at, I don't know whether I published that, like Leonid Uritskev was working, he got involved with cold fusion because he went into Chernobyl and he invented the 2-ton gamma camera. And if you look at the actual lens on the gamma camera, it's really weird because it literally looks like a triskelion. It's a quantum lens made out of metal, because gamma will just go through anything, right? So they had to make a quantum lens to be able to resolve any core that might have been left in the reactor. And they had the world's largest helicopter fly this 2-ton camera a couple of 100 meters above reactor 4. And there was no core. And what they found was, he said that when they went into the reactor, there was balls of light moving around in the reactor, right? That's one thing. 2, there were large chunks of equipment that had somehow managed to move from one part of the reactor facility to another part of the reactor facility, and there was no possible gap that they could have gone through, right? And then there were pieces of metal beams that were intersecting each other. They hadn't forcibly gone into each other. They hadn't bent over each other. They just, this beam was inside this other beam, right? Mm-hmm. And he said that the extremely brittle graphite blocks in the RBK, they're about I don't know, 40 centimeters long by 25 by 25. The pure graphite blocks that are the moderator blocks. 2 things. One, these were under the, I don't know, 500-ton reactor top, and somehow they'd come out of that. It lifted up the top. These things had come out. The top had been put down, and these things had flown up into the sky and landed down around the building, and they'd not broken. You could break them with your hand. And he said, like, what they actually found was the reactor core was smeared through the entire body of the reactor. That is to say that when they cut these ultra pure, and they're necessarily ultra pure graphite blocks, when they cut them in half, they found all the typical elements you get synthesized in cold fusion, plus chunks of uranium. There's no penetration holes. There's just a bit of uranium. And we know that ball lightning and microball lightning can grab a load of atoms. Sometimes it transmutes it, sometimes it makes it neutral, and it can teleport it into something else. So, and what did they attack? What was the attackers first used to destroy in Russia? It was an over-the-horizon radar, or in other words, a scalar interferometry weapon. Anyway,
And,
Laszlo, what do you have?
that was my reason hand beforehand.
Okay.
So I already asked the question.
Yeah,
So you
the
say that
story of
this
Chernobyl is
it's like
completely.
too big to be mobile, no? So probably if you have scalar interferometry, then it's too big device to make it mobile. So that's
No,
why they
I
don't
think you could
use
do it from
ballistic
satellite. I
missile.
think you could do it from submarine. Submarine's a good way to do it, actually.
Ah,
You
so they could do it
you
without
produce
ballistic
them from
missile.
submarine, and then you control them from satellite
Mm,
or
yeah,
from multiple ground stations.
yeah. So they could do it without using ballistic missiles then, because those could be probably taken out by some warps like MH37 on the other. So
Yeah, this is what I said earlier in the stream. I think they're trying to poke the bear enough so that they launch nuclear weapons and then they'll just take them out of the sky. They want a full-on nuclear launch and then they'll take them all out. And because you can't these ball lightning, they work in the water, they work in the sky, they work in the air, but they dissipate because there's so many ways that they could dissipate. They just dissipate in the ground. So you can't attack things in a silo. You can cause them to detonate, but you don't want to do that because you contaminate the land. That's actually what happened. So if you look at the Tom Bearden's book, he says the reason they put these charge dissipation devices under the ground around the Dugar that's 4 kilometers from reactor 4 at Chernobyl is that they had a nuclear processing waste dump and it was triggered to blow up because they had experimental equipment and it caused these triggering to blow up. And it is still radioactive to this day. It was the worst radioactive disaster. It's the first worst radioactive disaster. However, Alexander Shishkin says it's actually because of charge clusters built up because there's a lot of radioactive isotopes. They fired out these high energy photons and they cause exotic vacuum objects, he calls them static electricity, to build up, and then they triggered a cascade explosion which blew it up. So but whichever way you look at it, it's either charge clusters coming from the scalar interferometry system there, or it's charge clusters coming from the radioactive material that's already dumped in the ground. And he argues that the same thing happened actually at Fukushima. The explosion was caused by charge cluster buildup in the environment and caused that what looked like a little bit like a nuclear bomb, but it was a bomb that had nuclear bits in it. It's quite different. But actually, if you go and look, there's a study done in the Fukushima Daiichi district, and they have these like meteorite bits that came out and they're a very long way away. But when you look at the material that's in them, it's Lena synthesis material. There was a guy that was asking me to write a paper on that, and I thought, oh God, it's just another one to do. Just I want practical technology. I don't want to be having to answer all these questions. You know what I mean? All right, are we done?
thank you.
Oh, okay, Astros. One more question.
Yes. So the main question I had regarding that presentation and your recent ones is about the relationship between chi, prana, Holy Spirit, ether, etc., and the thing we call gravity, electronuclear collapse, synthesis of matter, etc. Like, which experiments or theories do you think best would be to look at?
So I've described it. There's the Middle Ages theory of gravity, which is the push theory of gravity. And they describe it as, I can't remember the name, but I describe it in the Matt Beal podcast. Matt Bell podcast. Sorry, Matt Beal. It's not Matt Beal, it's Matt Bell. I keep saying it wrong because I read it as it's written. Okay. Matt Bell. And basically they think that these ultra mundane corpuscles, i.e. they're barely interacting particles, come down from the cosmos and they effectively push things together. And if something's occluded, they get pushed in the same way that you can imagine the Casimir effect works, right? It's kind of like pre-Casimir Casimir effect. But I argue, and it's not an original idea because there's Russians that have thought this, and also when I first visited Piantelli in late 2014, in December 2014, he said, "Oh, Lena occurs in the Earth." All right, that's as far as his comment went, but I agreed with him. And if you go and look at Matsumoto's work, which is not in the book, which I hope to do in the second book, because he's actually drafted a second book, right? He talks about, and he shows how ball lightning is probably the cause of the heat in the earth, and he actually recorded during earthquakes and volcanic stuff the same kind of traces that you can make in the lab. It's absolutely amazing, right? The guy didn't stop when people didn't listen to him. He just carried on going, and so basically, there's Coriolis forces. There's metal by itself is a solid plasma. That is to say that the electrons are not associated with a particular atom nuclei, right? And so when you have a fluid metal, as you do in the core of the Earth and in the outer mantle, then these are producing magnetohydrodynamic structures which have a toroidal moment, which can interact with the anapole moment, which is a special class of toroidal moment in relic neutrinos, which are, in my opinion, this ultra mundane material, which is less than half of an electron volt apiece, more close to a quarter of electron volt. And it condenses those by bringing it into its cores and into ordinary matter. So that accounts for the Earth growing. And when you take something that's microns to millimeters in de Broglie wavelength and you condense it down from, let's say, 0.28 of an electron volt to 1 proton that has 938 million electron volts, that's a lot of very big things that are rarefied being condensed into a very small thing, which is condensed matter. And it's like a steam engine that's constantly condensing steam to water, and it's just pulling everything in. And this is where you get to the work of what's his name? Bob McElrath. He worked at CERN Theory Group in 2008. He published that background neutrinos, relic neutrinos, are a theory of gravity that's compliant with mainstream physics. But he didn't have this concept of condensation in the Earth. But basically, that is a gravity well. And Shishkin says that these relic neutrinos, they are what keeps the electron spinning, which was my second science question I had in my life when I was 5 years old. How do you get perpetual mobile of electron spinning? Well, it's because they go through the toroidal moment of the proton, which every atom has, right? And there's a toroidal moment because of the quark arrangements in a proton. And that can pull in these things that have a specialized version of the toroidal moment, which is an anapole. And if the electrons are slightly under-energized, it captures a minute amount of energy from that and keeps them in their orbits. If they're over-energized, this relic neutrino condensate, which is the hidden energy within matter, which is the etheric matter rays of Tesla, which is the foundations for static electricity to be built on, that sheds that extra energy from the electrons into the condensate. So there's this constant breathing going on in every atom. And that is part of what inertia is, as this material is going through you. If you're trying to accelerate into it, you're asking for a higher flux to go into you. So you have to overcome that in a kind of like Wakefield approach. And so that's going through. And the gravity well is the constant condensation of this rarefied material below you, right? And that's push as this thing is going into the gravity well, which is just a constant condensator. It's pushing you onto the planet. Okay, so
sorry.
Yeah.
Does this explanation mean that in the core of a planet, necessarily Earth, the same kind of...
I don't know why I can't hear you, Laszlo. It might just be me.
Okay.
Do you want to write it down? Anyway, to close out how it connects to consciousness is that essentially we have toroidal moment in our brain. I suspected it. It was proven effectively without saying it in the work that was published in June the 15th last year at Sydney Technical University. A vortex and an anti-vortex. If you go and look at my practical applications of the fractal toroidal moment from last year's ICCF, you can see the link to the paper. So the brain produces a toroidal moment. So the toroidal moment can interact with the superfluid condensate throughout the universe, which is one quantum wave function of relic neutrinos. And that's it, really. So you have consciousness linked to gravity, and linked to transmutation. It's all the same shit.
Bob, can I ask you one last thing?
If
You
you
remember
must.
you were talking about the chi being sucked out of a room,
Yes.
leading to an experiment ceasing to work.
Yes.
If there's no chi and there's no flux of neutrinos,
It's not good for
going on-
life. It's not good for life at all.
Well, okay, not good for life, but what about gravity and inertia?
It's still working through. Well, okay. There's such an abundance of these structures that a small adjustment to it is measurable, so that you can't. How should we say? There's an event horizon on these structures, and the event horizon is very, very tight. So in the work of, as I said earlier, in the work of what's his name? Parkemore. He found that it was about 20 centimeters around. I would expect there would be gravitational problems in that area. I would expect there'd be gravitational problems.
So as long as one stood well away, one could demonstrate anti-gravity or removal of inertia or something of that sort.
It's a very small variation, but it's enough so that you can't keep producing these clusters, essentially. And then it might be that you get the structures to a point where they're so self-contained that they stop interacting with the environment around them. So they're spun up enough so that they stop interacting. So the examples I would give is in Matsumoto's work, he ended up with spherical sections taken out of a piece of iron, out of a piece of palladium. John Hutchison saw the same thing. Out of a piece of iron, when he cut it open, there were spherical sections cut out of it. And Henk Uren, we visually saw the spherical thing, and when it went away, there was a spherical section taken out of a copper pipe. So, like, I think within that boundary, everything is consumed, and it moves away, and it might leave a hole there, and it certainly leaves probably a vacuum structure, and it might explain why, when you run these experiments, you see these hemispheres forming, and when you turn off the power and you turn it on again, they form in exactly the same position. Now, you might say it's just where all the charge and spatial charge is arranging itself, but these things do appear to live in metals indefinitely, and so there's some sort of flux, and Tesla described the etheric matter streams to continue for quite a period of time after he stopped producing the stream. Like in the beam, there was a continual flux or a stream of this thing. So I think of it like a Dyson air blade. Like you have the initial flux that you produce, but it entrains a lot of the etheric matter that's in the environment. So yeah. Did that answer your question? I don't know whether it did.
In part, Bob, thank you. It's an interesting conundrum. Will take a bit more thinking, I think.
Well, I like I say, there's a constant, like I say, in the bit in Xu Wenju's work, there is a diffusion, but it might be that there's a critical threshold, let's say. So like you've got a trillion of these units over here, and you've got 2 billion less than a trillion here. So you get the diffusion, but when it's at this level of density, it's insufficient to allow certain things to occur. So, for instance, if you look at the original person in classified research in Russia, Ivan Filimenko, in the 1950s, he did a palladium and deuterium boiling water reactor, and he also claimed that produced a form of radiation that could transmute beta isotopes, but he also found that it could shield radiation, and I didn't know what that meant. I never really understood what the shielding of radiation meant. But then if you go and look at Anatoly Klimov's presentation at this year's Russian Cold Nuclear Transmutation and Ball Lightning Conference, he said, and you can go and look at it, and I did as best translation as I could, he said, and this is the whole premise of his second presentation, that after he ran his inflow plasma vortex reactor, PVR reactor, which he has a patent for, and it was derived out of spending a couple of weeks with Ken Shoulders, and it has a Tesla coil in it, right? He says that using a gamma emission source in close to the reactor, the rate of gammas that you detect from that gamma source drops, which means something that is able to pass a gamma ray is now not there. So if you move it away, you get the same normal gamma counts from that detector and that source. So I think what Ivan Filimenko saw was a reduction in the density of the medium through which high energy photons can transmit. And it might be that, so I think we're getting to the answer here. Sorry, it's real time. Basically, in the work of Dr. Parkhomov, he found by using diffraction gratings that what he called originally N radiation, but because it does beta isotope transmutations through inverse beta decay, he knew it must have been neutrino-like material. He said it's microns to millimeters, right? Now, microns isn't the same as millimeters, is it? Right? So there's quite a lot of distance between a micron and a millimeter. So it might be that a particular structure is able to capture certain wavelengths of these structures based on its self-organized level internally. And it might be that the ones that are most effective for manifesting gravity are a particular type, and you need to get a structure to a certain level of quantization before it can interact with those that allow for the mean propagation of the gravitational field.
Okay, Bob, now you're talking. That makes much more sense.
That makes more sense to me. Yeah, I had to work that through in my head. You saw me what I do sometimes when I'm sitting on the toilet. That's me real time doing it.
Fine. You got there.
Yeah, you have to spin up a structure, and I hope maybe that we'll be able to demonstrate that next year. Spinning up a structure and doing something really you wouldn't believe it.
Does it mean that the strength of the gravitational field not only depends on the mass itself, but some properties of the matter?
I'm saying that the proton has its toroidal moment, and a different structure will have a different toroidal moment if it's big, but if that big structure then is energized such that it self-organizes to smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller structures, and as far as I can work out, the reason you get 2 kiloelectron volt electrons being emitted by cohering exotic vacuum object is because of the wheel within a wheel within a wheel diameter structure of the orbit of the electron around the proton, which is 25 picometers. Okay, and that limits the minimum toroidal size. And so I think that your initial toroidal dynamic structure might barely interact with the thing that causes gravity. But when you get it spun and spun and spun, you keep, you've got a spinning top and you keep knocking it round and knocking it round. You're providing it a little bit of extra kick of energy, and it's self-organizing into smaller and smaller fractal substructures. It gets to a point where it can interact with the medium through which we experience gravity.
Okay.
So you're using matter to access the way matter is interacted with, if that makes sense. It doesn't just happen. And it's lucky that it doesn't just happen because we'd have a very wonky universe. Everything would be going all over the place all of the time.
Yeah, my understanding until now was I thought that mainstream physics teaches us that it is really just one variable, the amount of mass, and then we have a linear corresponding.
No, I'm saying if you're making an anti-gravity device, the other thing is it has a directional beam, Paul. So you might be removing rarefied material in a field around it, but as it spins up, it produces the gravitational wave comes out at the front of it, and the disruption beam comes behind. This was observed by God, what's the guy who did the spinning superconducting disks? The disruption beam comes out, the beam comes out in front, and it comes out of arse. It depends which way you've got it oriented. But one way it disrupts matter because it's literally pulling stuff out of it, and it focuses it into a beam, and there's a beam that comes out the top. We see this in our experiments where they're self-organizing. So it might be that there's a rare refraction around the outside that could explain Klimov's observations, which I believe explain Ivan Filamenenko's observations in the 1950s. But this gravity beam would be, if you knew the orientation of your structure, if you had it one way up, it's going to be churning the material underneath it. If you turn it round, it might be having a flux of gravity wave going through it, a high frequency gravity wave. We see it in the experiments. We got like one that's coming over here, and this one's coming over here, and they don't care about the cathode and anode. They don't care about the magnetic effect or the electric field effect. But when they get close to an event horizon, they immediately start orbiting around each other, or they orbit around the forward direction. So like it's actually you've got something traveling in this direction, and this one starts orbiting around where that would be in the next frame. You know what I mean? So there's something coming out in front. And so it's a redistribution of the fields, the dielectric constant, the physical vacuum, the permittivity of the vacuum, and it's focusing potentially a medium. And it might be not that it's pushing it out. The beam is actually sucking it in. And so you're seeing a beam, but it's actually not going out, it's coming in. It's a focused vacuum.
Yeah, and what was the effect with the moon you described? How does that
So the relic
influence
neutrinos are
gravity?
microns to millimeters, so they interact partially with normal matter in the same way that if you look at a sheet of glass, you can look through a window, but if you look at a window side on, you can see a reflection of something else somewhere else, right? So light can partially go through a window. So what Parkhomov found was ordinary matter can partially reflect the relic neutrinos. Okay. And he used a pan lid. Why not? He had it in his kitchen. He didn't need it for cooking. Why not? It was a nice parabolic shape. But the moon obviously is a lot of solid matter. So that this material can travel through the moon, but it's going to interact with all those atoms, and it can partially be reflected and partially reflected. So
it means below the moon we have a smaller flux of relic neutrinos meeting the Earth.
So if you look at Xu Ju's work, I did a presentation called "If Gravity Can Do This, What Is Gravity?" So you can go and look at that. It's about 5 years ago, and I look at the work that was published in 1999 of Xu Ju's team in China from 1988 to 1999. They found 4 things that happened during 3 body alignments. That's either a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse. 1, the spectral lines of elements change. Now, what did I say? The position of electrons, according to Shishkin, is maintained by the flux of relic neutrinos. If you have a lower flux or a higher flux, then those will change, and you'll get different spectral lines when you you excite those electrons to a higher orbit, and then they descend to their stable orbit below. And this is what Leonid Arutskiev explained was the reason why there was this ethereal glow, which didn't have any spectra of ordinary ionized gas, and it's not Cherenkov radiation, above Chernobyl, which was witnessed by many thousands of people that lived in Pripyat. They saw this weird glow, right? And it wasn't the normal ionizations of gases that you would see. And it's because there was these charge clusters in there and a different flux, and the electrons were in a different position. Okay, so that's one. They normally when you excite an atom, you get the same spectrum back. It's one of the basis of spectroscopy, right? But in this case, you didn't during 3 body alignments. 2, there was a linear crystal growth in the solidification of a lead tin alloy, and I put that to crystal growth is defined if you have a normal flux of relic neutrinos as a random kind of arrangement. But if you have the moon in the way, for instance, you're getting diffraction. Like if you put a circle in the way of a light beam, you'll get some band diffraction beams, rings around the outside. So that's like it's producing a diffraction grating, effectively. And so the crystals grow in lines. Then the third thing that he found was this sideways movement of a brass sheet. And the fourth thing he found was cesium-137 and rubidium-87 beta isotope atomic clocks changed their count rate. And that's flat up changing of the weak force interaction, which must involve a relic neutrino or a neutrino of some type. So he didn't know, he didn't have an explanation because it's inverse beta decay. That's the whole basis of Parkhomov's book, wherever it is. The whole basis of Parkhomov's book is inverse beta reaction. And so he didn't know that what was causing these four effects. But we do know that relic neutrinos and all neutrinos are gravitationally lensed. They interact with two things, gravity and the weak force. That's it. And also, in my view, the toroidal moment via its anapole, which is a special case of the toroidal moment. Does that answer your question?
Great insights. I also read that the Kundalini effect or awakening is better when the moon is in a certain position. So probably it relates to this.
So what?
So the Kundalini awakening or Kundalini effect in the human body. I heard that it's happening easier when the moon is in a certain phase.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
so
the moon, any gravitational alignment will affect any living organism, and that includes the Earth, the moon. The moon isn't so alive as the Earth, obviously. The sun, the solar system, the galaxy, the universe.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you.
That's okay. And we've just had Charlie C join us. Was there something you wanted to ask Charlie C? Because I'm signing off. I don't know if anyone else is.
Yep. Just sign in, say hi.
Hi.
The last video, you mentioned some of the shielding from EVOs.
Yeah.
If you have any more comments.
I worry about you, Charlie. I keep saying I worry about you.
Thank you. Yeah, and not from shielding the person actually, but shielding the equipment too, because the disruptive nature of EVOs and eating the metal of the structure. Maybe you had some curious ideas of maybe using ceramics to shield the metal components from the EVO.
So if you want to prevent them going through, you want there's a couple of approaches. Excite them if they're already in the excited state. A ferrous material will stop them to a degree, right? Because they express when they might not express their magnetism whilst they're on the non-radiating boundary, but as soon as they try to go in through the non-radiating boundary into the inside, there's intense magnetic fields in there, and so they'll get stuck half in and half out. That's why you get hemispheres, in my view. The magnetic structure is like it gets locked in halfway, and it either gets, depending on its fractality, it'll get locked in one orthogonal position, right? So you get rings or you get lines, and they move along they typically go in and then move along the surface. So if they're in the white mode, then magnetic materials or paramagnetic materials can interact with them, in my view. If they're in the dark mode, then you need to excite them, and the only way you can excite them is with either a charged surface, which is great because in the Vega experiments, the cathode is the whole reactor. So not only is it made of not steel, it used to be made of steel, but I said to her, can we have this as mild steel, please? I want it to be ferromagnetic, right? And don't take it above the Curie point of iron, please. And then secondly, the whole reactor is negatively charged. Now, why do I say this? It's because of something that was shared by Slobodan Stankovic. He put some HHO through a capillary tube that he'd made using HHO in a graphite crucible, and he then videoed or got images of two twisted vortex beams which did not diverge. And I said, look, this looks like coherent matter, and it's formed because as the HHO has gone in, it's formed fractal toroidal structure. It doesn't matter where you point it through a capillary. At some point, you're going to get the shear forces, and you're going to get those rubber bands twisting and linking and producing a fractal toroidal structure. And it comes out, it produces the phase singularity in the center, and it produces those two vortex bits that comes out. So he showed this. And so Anatoly was in the room and he got very excited and he started asking questions. And then as soon as he could get away with it, he published formally classified research, as far as I'm aware, on plasmatrons, where they create charge clusters using a microwave in a microwave chamber, and then use a spark discharge to blow them up. And then the fragments come through a polycarbonate capillary tube, and the fragments are still ball lightning. But as they come through the capillary tube, they will self-organize into a fractal toroidal geometry, and he gets this thing that comes out, and it comes out in 3 components. One goes down, one goes up in different fields, and the other bit doesn't care about even a Mach 2 blast of air, which is the fastest air source that they had. It just goes in a straight line through Mach 2 air jet. And it also would go through any mesh of metal. But what they found was, if they got a mesh and they charged it to negative 2000 volts, there's that 2000 volts again. It would hit the mesh, because Ken Shoulders says you can't go over 2000 volts because it'll like break EVOs up, like if you want to tickle them into being useful. It would hit the mesh and it would stop dead. This thing that would go through a Mach 2 airstream, right? So it's not interacting with it's not ionizing the air particles that are going in a Mach 2 stream, and it's not physically interacting with them, which means it must be neutral. But when it hit that mesh that was charged 2000 volts, it stopped dead. Nothing was coming out the other side. Okay, so my shield, which I have, is aluminium. I have 7 layers of aluminium on each side, and then interspersed with cellulose, which is cellophane, which is made of cellulose. So I've got air, aluminium oxide, cellophane, times many layers of impedance changes. So I'll give it plenty of opportunity to get excited. And I think, but the aluminium, because it's sufficiently conductive, it will interact with that. But I connected a load of washers through it so that I can connect it to a negative supply, so that optionally I can have that charge. But I don't want to touch that if it's at 2000 volts as well. So it's about like which risk is greater to me immediately. So I think that's an active shield, but I think the passive shields are quite effective as well. But like I worry about you because you do a lot of these experiments, and you're a young man, and I don't know if you've got kids yet, but
yeah, I do. Yeah, but like you mentioned, I'm trying to see if it's feasible to shield the equipment itself, so it from being destroyed from the metal, like to have the layers inside the spheres, like in the plasmon, the thunderstorm generator. The equipment was also being overworked. When they overclock it and they overrun it, that's when the metal spheres start to receive damage. So
well, I don't know. You see, we don't know at what level that's happening in the thunderstorm generator. We just don't know what level it's happening. We don't know when it happened, because we know in 900 seconds we could produce a lot of the iron-rich crenellated spheres in a cavitation reactor, right? With what my colleague Alan Goldwater did. So that particular reactor that I looked at ran for 500 hours over 8 years, and we said that we don't know which part did it do it all of the time. But what I do know is once the structures have been there, they should be embedded into the metal. So it wouldn't take a lot, in my view, to get them reactivated again. And you might not necessarily see them working for them to actually be working. But it's when you push them over a limit, they will produce the flux loops. And we know the flux loops will go through metal. You see the flux loops literally in the 2019 paper by Bogdanovich et al., where they create ball lightning from plasma flow electric discharges, and they show the one monopole this end and the other monopole this end, and the flux loop, it's like floating in the water vapor, right? And they say it's a monopole on either end. They're not even being shy about it, right? And then they refer to Wyszynski's 2008 paper, which is Dirac compliant, equation complete model of a monopole. And it's essentially what gets produced by the fractal toroidal geometry. The thing that he shows is produced by the phase singularity and the associated field. And so, yes, you can shield it. I think charged metal is one way. So like it depends what's going on. The other thing is you can utilize it. So if it goes into graphite, graphite's like what you could see by when we were working with Amarza gas is if you use Amarza gas well below 1,000 degrees, it'll vaporize tungsten. It's not vaporizing tungsten, it's transmuting it and turning it into fine dust particles. Because when we sucked the dust particles into a face mask before they were fashionable, when you look at it, there was chunks of tungsten and there was the same transmuted elements which were never there, which were also on the tungsten which had been impinged by the gas, right? So you smashed up pieces of tungsten and in the filter, like totally unique experiment. On the bolometer, it wasn't over 1,000 degrees, like 700 degrees. Not even at the temperature the tungsten should be oxidizing. Okay. And then you look at the titanium, I think one of them was 700, the other one was 300, so in those kind of ballpark hundreds of degrees. Titanium just went whole straight through. But if you took 10% of a hydrocarbon gas and added it, the temperature went way, way up. Like the titanium went from whatever it was to 1,200 degrees. The tungsten went much, much higher, but it didn't do any vaporization. It didn't glow as brightly white. It glowed orange. So carbon is good at thermalizing whatever this material is. And in that respect, anything that is a neutron capture, a neutron moderator, will interact with these structures because they're actually neutral for whatever reason. And actually, if you have carbon which has benzene rings, or it's like a packed, graphite effectively is sheets of, hexagons essentially. But they have these delocalized electrons, which effectively kind of like a toroidal moment anyway. So I think that's part of what's going on with how carbon's very good. It's something I don't know where I read it. It's about 32 times better at thermalizing. So this is if you want to create heat, but if you want to use that strange radiation, you need a secondary material like lithium fluoride, which was identified by Alexander Parkhomov. So he had a generator, which was literally a tungsten filament light bulb overdriven so that the core was running, the actual wire was at 2,500 degrees. And at that temperature, about 50% of the weight of the tungsten filament is producing cold neutrino equivalents. And that's basically, you've got the atoms of dense matter smashing together and they produce a vortex and anti-vortex. They produce a cold neutrino and a cold anti-neutrino, and they flood out. And then you interact that with material that can interact with a weak force. And he found that within that secondary material, lithium fluoride, that he got the most heat gain over control materials. So if you're producing a flux of these things, if you can stop them in a material that then gives you thermal heat gain, and ideally we will be able to in the next year either see Rossi deliver. And I said earlier in the stream, I've moved from 80% a couple of weeks ago to about 90% certain that he has what he's claiming. If he has what he's claiming, we need to be using the flux of strange radiation that will definitely be coming off this. And so like you can produce heat from that as a secondary bonus over and above the light that it will be producing as a predominant output. So shielding technology is basically magnetic if it's or paramagnetic if it is in the white state. If it's not in the white state, you want the most conductive things you can get, and that's silver. And we know silver works. We worked from Tesla's real-time X-rays before Röntgen invented X-rays. It worked with Russ George, who I did a recent video with, where he had a discharge between two palladium electrodes in deuterium, a corona discharge, and we know that this does cold fusion. It's Irina Savatomova's classic experiment. She's did one last year or the year before, but anyway, it does transmutation. And he found he had a Geiger Muller tube outside the reactor, and he accidentally put some metal in between, and the counts, which were basically background forever and a day, suddenly went very, very high. And he then oh, I wonder if it's the type of metal. So he kept putting different types of metal, and he found when he put silver in, it produced the most ridiculous number of counts. And he got totally scared because he thought if this was neutrons activating the silver, he should be dead already. The flux should be phenomenal. So he went to Edward Teller and said, look, what's going on here? Look at this data, and this is the experience. He said, oh, we call these machunigons, which are called which translates in Yiddish to crazy particles, which is interesting because that was in the early 90s or early in the 80s or something, I don't know, 89 or whatever. It must have been when Edward Teller was alive and the cold fusion had happened. So those two things must be true. Otherwise, Russ George is making it up. But anyway, he said silver was the thing that did it. And it wasn't until 10 years later or so that Leonid Oritskev talked about what they call strange radiation. But it was crazy particles by Edward Teller and strange radiation. And you want to be able to use these things. So silver is the thing, and that is the basis for the patent for Shishkin, which I've done the translation on remoteview.icu, so you can go and see that. And so we're going to look at testing various ones of these different technologies, because this is why I've been focused on the radiation for 4 years. What can we use? Because I've got a video you can go and see on my channel, which is from Sochi in 2008, and you've got Dmitry Baranov, Valery Zatelepin, and Alexander Parkhomov, and they're both mocking Alexander Parkhomov because he's got his calorimeter as a metal device, and they're saying, Alexander, you're wasting all your strange radiation. You should be using it. Like, you can literally see that conversation. They're doing, I think they're even speaking in English for my benefit, but you can translate if not. But they're mocking him because, like, you're producing all of this hidden energy within matter, but then you're dumping it into the environment. You want to be putting a secondary material in there. And I think that might have spurred him on to do this big study on which secondary materials are most effective at creating not only thermalization, like you get with graphite, but and then the last thing is you can't use a ionic ceramic, because an ionic ceramic is what was used in the Nernst lamp in the late 1890s to early 1900s, right? Where basically you had a heater element that heated up the ionic ceramic until it became a perfect conductor, or a very good conductor. And then you pass the electricity through the actual ceramic. People think these refractory insulators are good, like quartz. No, ionic. Zirconia, ionic. Aluminium oxide, ionic. They're shit. When you get them up to a high temperature, they become conductors, right? So you can't use them. You have to use boron nitride or diamond, right? Those are the options. There's not a lot of other options. So you can use those. And what happens is that eventually an EVO will be up to such a level that it'll be able to change the permittivity of the vacuum and affect electrons such that it'll go through anything when it's spun up and energized enough. But for ceramics, it just bores through them very easily if they're ionic. But if they're covalent, it's a little bit harder to interact. So these are the suggestions that I made publicly to try and help the problems that Mills was having with his sun cell. And then he introduced graphite and boron nitride. And he suddenly got the devices that worked. But he's definitely got no ball lightning going in and making holes in his reactor. And he's definitely got no exotic vacuum objects making his tungsten electrodes and his lid electrodes disappear, because he's doing something different. He has his own private universe. I love you, Randall, but you got to come clean. Yeah, and it produces a lot of UV, by the way. These things. So yeah, so that's basically it. So it depends how much you spin these structures up. And of course, if they get in metals and you get so many of them and they don't discharge, the metal will turn to jelly. And if they're in certain fields and the fields are interacting with the very tight fields that are not fully enclosed in a non-radiating boundary, then you're going to get some interaction. So a magnet will be able to manipulate the thing at a distance. And also, if you have phase conjugated waves, scalar waves charging the monopoles on your metal sample, and then you change the phase relationship of those by twiddling some knobs, you're moving the nodes around. And if the node has grown from a nanostructure through to something that's a centimeter in size, and you've got another one here, and then you move the phase relationship between those two around, they might twist and twist your metal, and that's the Hutchison effect. And depending on whether it's in a paramagnetic material or a ferromagnetic material, the paramagnetic material, these things can move around in, but the ferromagnetic, they get locked in place, so they just tear the matter apart. It just rips. So it depends on the material you've got. Gadolinium's interesting.
What do you think of using biological materials like animals and plants versus ceramics and metals?
Well, we know it interacts with animals because the Russians have done the work with exploding metal foils and electrical high intensity pulse discharges. So we know it interacts, but that can be beneficial and negative. They showed that too. So you don't want to be around this producing the right type of clusters if you've got cancer, but you do if you haven't got cancer, but you don't really want to have it unless and this is a whole other topic. So I was meant to finish an hour and 15 minutes ago, and it was only meant to be for the DAO. So we'll talk more on a call recorded, and I hope we get to speak to the people and have those people on the call in the coming. I've scheduled a time between the 17th and 20th, I think.
Yep, I just hadn't reached out to I just hadn't reached out to Charlie to inform him of that.
So that's going to happen, Charlie. So
yeah.
Sounds good.
You can go away and think of what you're saying, but I really worry about you because Ken Shoulders was very cautious and his body was riddled with cancer. I know what the cancers were that Matsumoto had. I didn't run the reactor here, as I said earlier in the stream. I don't know whether they were there, but I didn't run it for 4 years because I was worried because the person that made it, who was 40 years old, died of cancer. Right? Yuji Bazhatov, he was doing surface water corona discharges, and he died extremely suddenly from a very, very aggressive cancer. But it's one thing when it's mature people that have been playing with this for a long time, but for what the guy did that built the supernova reactor and the nova reactors, that's a young guy, and you should be playing safe. Yeah. That goes for you, Nikita, as well. Keep your distance. It's when there's a video, it's on our YouTube, and Parkamov's got this, what he calls the woodpecker, which I think is funny because that's what the signal was that came out of the Duga array, but it's hilarious anyway. He calls it the woodpecker because it's just coming up and down and tapping as the solenoid makes the connection. It pulls it up again. It's producing this radio. And someone goes, "Don't you worry about the strange radiation that's coming out?" So he says, "No, I've got it in another room." He said, "Don't worry about it at all. I'm a long way away from it." So that's the story. Although Shishkin does say that when he calls them when they're unwinding and traveling. So I shared a presentation in my last stream where I think it's from 2006 or something, or they're showing that when they say this is possibly applicable to coherent matter and Bose-Einstein condensates, but they're doing it in coherent light, and they have a phase singularity of a torus of light, a flat torus of light, and they show that the soliton of light, and they show that as it propagates, if it becomes unstable, it separates into two vortices of light, one left and one right, and we've literally caught that on camera David Buttiglione, where you see the ball lightning form, it then blows up, and there's a vortex coming out that way one way, and there's an anti-vortex coming out that way. So, like, we're definitely producing coherent matter, and we're definitely seeing the birth and destruction of the coherent matter. And the strange radiation tracks are these interactions of this coherent matter and its substructures as a traveling wave. I call them coherent matter traveling waves with other materials, which have got a much higher. The matter has a higher binding energy than ordinary matter, so it interacts in very weird ways. It's a different as Ed Lewis intuited and spoke about on his stream with the Russian community last week or the week before. It's a new phase of matter. We're creating a new phase of matter. It's more solid than solid, although it looks like it's a plasma because of what it does near to it. It interacts with matter near to it, like in the Bogdanovich work. They're moving around on a piece of metal 2 days after the experiment shut down. Like, no one's feeding it energy. It's just sitting there moving around on video, glowing. But it's glowing because it's keeping itself alive. And in the process, when I talk about how the energy system works, okay, so here's a little parting gift. If the Kickstarter is successful, and the closing date is the 12th, sorry, it's the 24th of the 12th, 24 at 2400 hours California time, right? So, like, Christmas Day in California, as soon as you go into, if it's positive, I'll have a gift for you on the energy side. That's my sweetener in this story. I think I've cracked how you don't need to fuse matter. You don't need to even have all the other things that have been said that these structures can do. You can literally do it from something that has been suspected since 1912. And so you can probably make a safe permanent energy generator out of this.
Well, you're 1/8 there already, Bob.
What's that?
You're 1/8.
Hey,
there.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well done. Whoever that was. Thank you. Cool. All right, so I'm done. Does anyone else have anything closing to say that is not a question to me? Because I might have to answer it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody who's joined us. Thank you for your input. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for everything involved in the DAO. You've all been amazing, and I look forward to working with everybody going forward. So thank you very much.
Okay, good team. Okay,
sweet, guys.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Later. Sorry, I've not given you enough love in the chat, but I'll see you later.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.